All right. Hello there, lords and ladies in it. Welcome back to episode 37 of the Council of Candor. We have a very special guest with us today, Mr. Zimzilla99. How you doing, Zim?
I'm doing amazing time to talk about some dinosaurs.
Oh, I'm ecstatic. I love dinosaurs.
Mm.
So,
Can't go wrong with a good soar.
exactly. So now that we have you here first, so you all know the rest of the co-hosts. You know Des and Pops. Pag might be joining us later. But yeah, today it's going to be a bit of an interesting discussion. We're talking about different dinosaur media and dinosaur fiction, kind of like what we did 2 weeks ago, except this time we have an expert with us. So now we're classy.
Yeah, no, I get to be nice and studious. Finally putting that degree to good use.
Oh, yeah, what's your degree in?
English.
Ah, perfect.
So my degree is in English, and if there's one thing I do want to write about, it would be talking about dinosaur media across all the years. So I guess this is my little test run.
I think it's fantastic. So yeah, I think before we fully dive into the dinosaur media, I think first we should talk about the big debate in dinosaur media, the thing that broke the chat last time at the very end, and I want to open with it this time. Should dinosaurs be scientifically accurate, or should they be big lizard boys?
I think, I guess, as the new guest and the self-proclaimed experts, I think it very much depends on the story, and I think that certain settings do better with more realistic dinosaurs, while other settings do better with more fantastical or retro style dinosaurs. And I think that the issue, and I think this has to do with the dinosaur community itself. I think even in your first stream, you talked about the autism that comes in with the dinosaur community, and I think that in a lot of cases, anytime you're putting dinosaurs into a setting, you're doing it in a lot of cases because it does attract dinosaur fans, and everyone in that community has their own pet peeves and their own pet theories about one thing or the other. So I guess my answer is I have to be a filthy fence setter in this case and say it depends on the setting.
I think that's a completely fair answer.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where you kind of can't please everyone.
Mm-hmm. Because I'd say generally, it does kind of actually go into my notes in a sense of this topic, because when you're looking at dinosaurs, you're either looking at them as two different ways. They're either exceptionally unique animals in the sense of they are unique to one location, or they're unique to a certain continent or a certain kind of general location. So a lot of cases, any fantasy settings that have a lot of jungles, swamplands, there's usually going to be dinosaurs there, or badlands, things of that nature. Or in or people are familiar with it, if you play World of Warcraft, Agoro Crater is one of the only locations outside of two others, excluding Zandalar, which appeared later on in the games, that has dinosaurs in them. So they're either very secluded, or they are integrated more into the ecosystem, but that ecosystem is very unique to just dinosaurs. And dinosaurs in those cases usually take over as the main fauna of that area. So instead of wolves, you get raptors, for example.
That's how I see them in a lot of fantasy settings. I know that a lot of mods for Skyrim, for example, will replace basically, like you said, the wolves. If you visit Argonia with the little raptor guys.
Yeah, no, exactly. And in other cases too, other fantasy settings will have them be secluded to essentially what is just Skull Island, but no longer called Skull Island. And those settings are really fun. The cool thing about those kinds of settings is that because they're islands, they're very sequestered off, and it allows for a designer, a game master, video game designer, to really shape that entire ecosystem to exactly how they want, and they don't have to worry about too much outside influence that comes in when you have to deal with a large spanning continent, like say Tamriel, for example.
I find it is, like you said, it's both interesting, but I actually find it as a double-edged sword, because a lot of times what it does is you have the problem that D&D has, where there's the dinosaur section, and if you're not venturing in the dinosaur section, you don't get to play with dinosaurs, but other prehistoric creatures like mammoths and smilodons show up throughout the other parts of the map. And I think it's a severe lack of creativity to do that. If you want dinosaurs in your setting, which I think it's a good question to ask, especially for fantasy authors, then you should put them a little bit more spread out.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think this also just has it comes from, in a sense, how paleo art was depicted throughout the years, where you generally, like, for the science lesson for everyone who isn't aware, you have essentially the Paleozoic, which is before the dinosaurs, the Mesozoic, which is the age of the dinosaurs, then the Cenozoic, which is the age of mammals. In a lot of cases in fantasy media, and I think that King Kong, again, is a big influence on this, and to a lesser degree, The Lost World, you have animals from the Mesozoics of dinosaurs, and then animals before the dinosaurs that have this interesting commingling with each other in places like Skull Island, where you get big dinosaurs and big insects, because that's one thing the Paleozoic is known for, is large insects in the Carboniferous. And then outside of that, with the Cenozoic, because you have the sort of stereotypical idea of the Ice Age, and we already know that there are ancient people living during the Ice Age, it feels more natural to include things like mammoths, woolly rhinos, saber-toothed tigers outside of a general setting, like one area for those kinds of animals. So I think for, like, in the mind of a fantasy author or creator, it just naturally makes more sense, not implicitly understanding like why they don't include dinosaurs as much. In a lot of cases, people think it's anachronistic in a lot of ways, which I don't think there's too much of an issue with that. I mean, it's not like you're putting in like a Range Rover into Middle Earth. Having different paleontological animals in a setting is always pretty fun.
Well, I do want to hit on something. You mentioned The Lost World, and I want chat to know, because correct me if I'm wrong. You're talking about the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle novel from the 1912, right? Not the Jurassic Park one, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about the original one.
Yeah, I just want to make sure chat knows, because we have a lot of youngins in the audience who aren't as well read as we are.
Yeah,
I keep finding that out when I talk about things that I think are common, and they're like, "What are you talking about, old man?" I'm like, "I'm not old. I'm not old."
Is that like you're older than me? And then like I'll say things that people are younger than me. I'm like, what?
Literally today, it was very funny.
Yeah, we did have that moment today. It was very shocking. But yes, and I think The Lost World is.
I want to point out a comment from Drake Boy.
Certainly.
About where was it? Or no, I lied. It wasn't Drake Boy. It was the other commenter,
Skylar Kingery.
Yeah, dinosaurs aren't monsters. They're animals. Even when you watch documentaries. I mean, monsters are basically animals. You want to treat them like animals. Like the only difference.
I get what he's going for. I think
very and like scaly. You know, like they're monsters in that sense. But like monsters, just it's not
I get what he's going for. Think about he's talking about like Jaws. Jaws isn't an animal. It's as I would describe dragons in my setting. It's a being full of scales piloted by hate. It's not doing animal things. It hates you and it wants you to die. Versus that's how a lot of dinosaurs are in media. And there's actually another little thing I want to mention. You also miss the very, very small sliver of dinosaurs are smart fiction, which is encompassed entirely by Dinotopia and weird spin-offs that I don't want to talk about because DeviantArt was a mistake.
Yeah, like Dinotopia, East of Eden.
Yep, East of Eden.
Pellucidar to a lesser extent, because the Mahar, they're not dinosaurs, they're pterosaurs, but let's not get too nerdy with that.
Yeah,
like intelligent dinosaurs have been there for like a while. Or if we're thinking sci-fi, there's the Voth from Star Trek, which I think they're only for like a one-off episode.
Yeah, but they're still hinting at that same thing. And I do want to, I wanted to bring it back to what we're talking about with The Lost World. I think The Lost World by Doyle, like you mentioned earlier, that's the reason that dinosaurs are always thrown in at the end. And it's also usually, and I could point to Gary Gygax specifically as to why this phenomenon keeps showing up. It's because whenever you're writing a setting, you try to base it on something you know. Like, for example, medieval fantasy is based on medieval history that you then add elves and stuff into. You try to emulate that feel and that vibe. But dinosaurs weren't there. So unless you're consciously putting them in there, you're going to forget about it. Then, Gary specifically will get to a point where it's like, wow, I read a Conan story where he fist fought a Tyrannosaurus. That's really cool. I want to have T-Rexes in my setting now. So he adds a whole, rigmarole of how they got there.
Yeah.
I'll also say Conan typically has that more prehistoric, so I feel like he's usually fighting those more
Well, that's by design, actually.
Yeah, that's one of the things when it comes to Conan, at least.
He's fighting in Lemuria, right? If I recall?
No, Conan Tyboria.
Hyboria, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I kind of getting at though. Like the setting, it's kind of designed for that. Where like
Mhm.
you know, the setting is giving you like the mental image of like you know, before man walked the earth type vibes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
That's the
there's
thing
still
too.
saber tooth and
Is
stuff, but like no one like saw those. Or like
Mhm.
no one they haven't been around for so long that they're in the same like your mind puts them in most people in the mind put them in the same space as like dinosaurs basically.
Yeah, no,
Not just that, I
definitely.
would also say something else that I would, on that same point. Conan itself hasn't stuck around in the zeitgeist as much as people like to think
Yeah.
it has. It's like Flash Gordon. Flash Gordon, people still talk about it, but the only thing Flash Gordon's important for is influencing Star Wars enough to get Star Wars. That's how a lot of the
Yeah.
Conan stuff is. The only real cultural impact left from Conan is it made D&D have barbarians, essentially. I know that's contentious. Fight me later, chat. But that's really the only thing that Conan left for us, unfortunately. And it's a
I
real
think
damn
in a lot of
shame.
ways too is
I-
that when it comes to Conan, there's Howard Conan, and then there's everything else that came out after Howard passed away. Because the one example you do have of a dinosaur, there's actually two. There's the Shadow Kingdom, which is a cult story where they reference dragons as being winged dinosaurs, and that's I think the only time in a Howard written story that you hear the word dinosaur. And then in Red Nails, when they encounter a dragon, which is essentially a man, like a carnivorous stegosaurus, they mentioned that at this point, like long time ago, in the distant past of that area of Hyboria, that there were dragons walking around and they were resurrected from what was essentially fossils, versus other works that were done by like Marvel, Dark Horse, and the like that explicitly had dinosaurs more explicitly in the Hyborian age.
Well,
You
I was also going to bring this up
Yeah.
before, but we got a little side tangent on this podcast.
Mhm.
No way. But I feel like in fantasy they usually don't come up because the like mental image of like a dinosaur just goes onto the dragon or like
Yeah.
a wyvern.
it
You know,
plays in.
so it feel like kind of weird because like they're like worse dragons slash wyverns, you know, because they don't breathe fire. I have to check the size, but they're probably maybe smaller. There's definitely like a lot of them, velociraptors are of course smaller, but
Mhm.
even some of the bigger ones, like the T-Rex and stuff,
It was
probably are smaller compared to like, especially depending on what dragon you're talking about, considering how big those guys can get.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think like
Just
another thing
a
too is that
less too low of a threat.
like a lot of modern fantasy creators who've done like modules for adding dinosaurs into their settings, whether they're for like plugins for D&D or Pathfinder, what they do tend to do now is have dinosaurs essentially get superpowers to where like I know Drakeboy in the chat mentioned Allosaurids and Carcharodontosaurids. An interesting thing about the Carcharodontosaurs is that it's called a shark-toothed lizard. So in those cases, they'll have that group of dinosaurs have like higher affinity for like slashing with their teeth, things of that nature, and essentially in a way to like make them be pseudo dragons without like the fire breathing, the wings, etc. That's like another reason why you don't see like pterosaurs cross over much into fantasy nowadays, because essentially pterosaurs are like worse dragons in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think it depends, especially with fantasy. Like it's difficult to figure out like a niche, like an ecological niche, or like dinosaurs would play in a fantasy set when you have options of fantasy creatures.
Mm-hmm. I think
Like-
another thing too is that like you can also have like for me, whenever I think of like adding dragons and dinosaurs, my main idea is dragons are explicitly more magical and less ecologically tied to the land that they're in, whereas
Mm.
dinosaurs, being the fact that they don't usually have magical elements, are more directly what impacts the world from like an ecological sense in that way.
Yeah, and I think it would be easier if you're going to have it be like, like an active enemy with intentions and everything. It would be easier to make it like a dragon is like that
Mhm.
rather than a dinosaur, which people do look at because they really existed as like, more of an animalistic thing that doesn't really have the intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And
So it's-
dinosaurs are just outclassed by other fantasy creatures like manticores. I do want to look at chat real quick before we continue, though. A few things. First, I want to shout out what Drake Boy said. Have any of you heard about the Valley of Gwanji? I have. For those of you who don't know, that's Ray Harryhausen's last film that he worked on. The idea was it was supposed to be like a hidden area in Mexico that they were doing some filming in, and they find dinosaurs, and they bring them to their stunt show. If I remember the film correctly, it's actually kind of disappointing. There wasn't a lot of dinosaur action in there. There was a lot like of horse, I don't want to say CGI, but like horse animation and stop motion and stuff. And it's not as dinosaur rich as you wanted it to be, if I recall.
Yeah, the main like thrust of it is because of a prehistoric horse called an Eohippus that they find in the valley. And then the horse gets released by like the minor antagonist of the film, and then that's when they start coming across the dinosaurs. As well as also that was one of his later films, but the last one that Harryhausen did, I believe, was actually Clash of the Titans, because Gwanji I think was 1969 and Clash was 1981.
Yeah, you're right. I think Gwanji was his last dinosaur one. Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that was the last dinosaur one he did. Yeah,
but
that's a good it's a good example of how people kind of have that the Lost World vibe when it comes to discovering dinosaurs. A lot of the time, it's like put them in a setting where it's like they're part of almost like an other world within your world, because it's supposed to be, you know, foreign enough to the characters that it's like a big deal when you discover them. You know, they've kind of developed separately from you know, the main people or whatever you have.
Yeah, they usually serve more as like things in the secondary worlds of sci-fi settings, more so than fantasy ones. And then with fantasy ones, they essentially take the same ideas and carry them over into a fantasy setting.
And, you know, to me, it's something interesting is I want to say, I think I would blame Dinotopia for it, but I'm not comfortable. I have to do some more research saying that before I'm confident. But there was kind of a slow death of the dinosaur genre, and I know Jurassic Park came out and revitalized it, but it was still just the same. The dinosaurs are basically screwing with us. They're in the modern day. It was all modern day dinosaur fiction with a couple twists on a little bit more sci-fi. They kind of fell out of fantasy for a long time there, outside of specifically dinosaur fiction, until it's okay, Black and Rudy, you're still the moderator of the chat. You don't have to super chat, buddy.
Oh my goodness!
He spent all his money buying Squirrel Girl skins in the new Marvel game, because she's the best girl, right, Rooney? So
Rooney loves her the most.
Yeah, Rudy loves Squirrel Girl. We will bully him more. Anyway, so yeah, I think Dinotopia is the thing that changed that, because that was the first time that dinosaurs were like used by the people in the setting. I know in Dinotopia they're like friendly with them, but when James really started working at it, he wanted to find a way to make dinosaurs fit in the setting. He had the idea of like, let's put saddles on them. How would saddles work? And he took like I don't want to say scientific, but a logical approach to it, and tried to really work on it and figure it out. And that deeply inspired a whole heck of a lot of fantasy. And for those of you who are fans of Warhammer, I know you're in the chat somewhere, Titan. Warhammer Fantasy with the Lizardmen, you don't get the Lizardmen without, yes, we're talking about dinosaurs, Minecraft world, you don't get the Lizardmen, and you don't get that idea, let's make the Aztecs dinosaur people, without Dinotopia. I fully believe that, because that setting inspired and said, hey, you don't get Ark Survival Evolved either. That said, hey guys, here's the way you do that. Here's how you show off how dinosaurs should look with saddles. And then other creators said, I could put a saddle on the Tyrannosaurus, well, I should put an AK on the Tyrannosaurus too, and now we can, ride it around and have all this crazy cowboy action in the Mongolian stuff. You get all this crazy stuff with it.
Yeah. So. Another thing too is that you also have, like, again, dipping more into sci-fi, you have Dino Riders from the late 80s. Around, 88. And I'm also trying to think, were the Lizardmen introduced into fantasy before the Exodites, the Exodite Eldar were in Warhammer 40k? Or were they around the same time? Because, like, essentially, you have riding dinosaurs as the Lizardmen in fantasy and the Exodites in 40k. I just know the Exodites have been around for a while, but, like, I haven't done as much research into when those ones specifically
I know they were in the 90s.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. If you distract chat long enough, I can look into it.
Yeah, I'll distract chat.
Because I remember the Lizardmen, when they were introduced, it was really cool. They had basically a super civil war where every faction had to fight the Lizardmen.
Yeah.
Ernie, what the hell did you mean by that?
Like,
Can someone read that and explain what the hell that's supposed to mean?
It's got
Who
the
said
word,
it?
it's
Rooney.
got the I don't want to read
Yeah.
that.
It's military jargon for wood. Simple as.
Rooney.
Yeah.
I think it's military genre for mid, which he's wrong about. But I'm like confused. What like why that string of words?
He's talking about how it's almost like
Wood.
you didn't mean to make something scandalous, but then you just leaned into it because you're like, hey, you know what?
I just have no clue
I
what
don't.
he
I'm
means.
sorry, Rooney. Come on, man.
I actually don't understand what he means by that. He's wrong, but like I know he's wrong. I just don't know what point he's getting at. Like I just
He's not. He's incoherent. It's his second.
yeah, like he's just putting words together. I just
Listen.
don't understand.
Anyway, let's.
Putting words together.
I wanted to bring up real quick why it's interesting. We do have to give Dinotopia a lot of credit because it's one of those stories where it shows people and dinosaurs almost like the dinosaurs are not an otherworldly like discovery or anything. It's like they have been coexisting with them, and not only have they been coexisting, they've been cooperative as well. Like it's not like Conan where like yes, we know they coexist with dinosaurs, but it's more like they're enemies.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting thing that they did. I think Dinotopia probably did the best job of that. We don't see it very often, so I feel like we got to give them a lot of credit for it.
Another thing too, and this goes back to the accuracy thing, Dinotopia did a lot when it came to its dinosaurs because Gertie did do a lot to ensure their accuracy, although some of the accuracy has gone by the wayside with recent discoveries. But his dinosaurs and like how vivid his art was very persistent and held up for a very long time. And I think that his attention to detail and how realistic it was and how plausible it was, even though the book fell out of favor, there's still people that like if you show them a picture of his art, they'll recognize it as Dinotopia's dinosaurs.
Yep.
Yep.
That happens all the time in the last few videos I made on Dinotopia. I've had people just love bombing it because they're like, oh, I remember this. Even the last video I made where I talk about why Dinotopia sucks. Go watch it. If you're mad at me right now, go watch the video. You won't be once you watch it, I promise. Also, to answer the question, the Exodites were shown off and talked about 2 years before the Lizardman models officially came out. So I would think the Exodites came first as probably like a, hey, let's put this out there. People think dinosaurs are cool. Okay, let's go double down on the Lizardman.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense then. Because like they aren't very similar aesthetically outside of the fact that they both ride dinosaurs. Like I'd argue that like again going back to World of Warcraft, the Zandalar borrow far more from the Lizardmen than the Lizardmen and the Exodites share in terms of their aesthetic similarities.
Definitely. And again, the idea of tying lizard people to dinosaurs, that's always been really funny to me. That's just, I've endlessly found that amusing. Because the idea that, like, that would, for chat, that'd be the equivalent of us riding around on, like, giant apes and stuff. It's very funny the way that, like, you have that immediate, like, small brain idea. I know that dinosaurs are more varied, but it's just funny as heck to me that there's all these creatures that you have that you could put on dinosaurs, and I almost always see it's lizard people. Whereas if you go look at something like Eberron, which is just Eberron, by the way, is the best of all the D&D settings. If anybody tells you otherwise, they're wrong. But Eberron has this really cool thing, like just with the halflings, the hobbits. You expect them just to be eating, bread all day and laying around. Well, no, their homeland got attacked and like destroyed, and so now they became wanderers. So they wandered the map, but they have to protect themselves. So they tamed velociraptors, and they ride velociraptors around now. So it's just like awesome. You got these halflings riding around in dinosaurs.
The cool thing too is that like it's actually very smart that they use the halflings for this because it kind of solves the problem of like separating itself from Jurassic Park, because when you have the idea of like what a raptor is in pop culture, inevitably you're still gonna think of Jurassic Park. But like in some of the fan art I have seen of Eberron, because when you had mentioned it to me when we had planned this, I had done some research on the setting, and there is like gradually with like more of the new art that I've noticed fan art wise, they're moving away from that Jurassic Park, and even some of the stuff that was earlier in the setting separated itself too. But like the idea of smaller people being able to use a vast quantity of dinosaurs as like mounts, it's very interesting. I do like the idea, and it still has that image of a person riding a dinosaur, in this case a very famous one.
There he
I love
is.
Peg.
This loser.
Hi.
Hello.
Oh man. So, Peg, what do you think about the halflings riding dinosaurs in what's it called? Eberron?
Eberron,
Eberron.
I
Eberron.
love it. I am
Yeah.
normally a deep and abiding hater of halflings because they are pretty much all the same and very bland in most settings. But in Eberron, they just went full send with their halflings. They were like, yeah, they're cannibal madmen who ride dinosaurs.
Peg,
It's fantastic.
I want you to know, the second you said, I hate halflings, literally 25% of the audience went away.
Hey, you know what? Halfling
that's funny.
halfling lovers are not welcome around here.
Well,
I'm
they
not a
are,
fan
but they
of
have to
halflings
tell me
either.
why they love halflings. And you can't use Lord of the Rings as an example.
Exactly.
Outside
That's the
of Lord of the
problem with them.
Rings, literally the only things I do like that I've researched is from Dark Sun. Outside of that, I'm not
Dark
a
Sun's
huge fan
pretty
of
good, too.
halflings or gnomes. Like neither one of those. Like they
No,
just
gnomes
kind
are
of
great. Gnomes are 10 out of 10. Halflings are boring.
Gnomes
You'll
are usually
have to
terrible
convince
because
me.
they're like tied at the ankles to halflings. If you just have one of them in your setting, that lets the race shine really well. Very rarely, my own setting, have I ever seen somebody put two of them together and it not feel like arbitrary because they don't want to make them unique enough. Is the problem. Like I don't have any good art for it yet, but the gnomes in my setting, because they have magic all throughout them, they have an extra vein in their arm that's just like a lighter blue, so you can kind of faintly see the magic that flows through them. And it's like, oh, that's one of the myriad of things that sets them apart from halflings.
It's
Yeah, the
like
thing is, halflings are just like pretty much you just take all of the other races in a given like generic fantasy setting, and you're like, oh yeah, they're like elves but a little bit less magical, and they're like humans but they're a little bit less everywhere, and it's just like that for every single thing. They're just everyone else but a little bit less, and then they tie them all together, and that's a halfling.
Yeah, it's a
And
very
it's just
boring
not great.
development.
I think the I brought up before, where it's like it's difficult to give them a specific ecological. What am I trying to say? Like they fill a certain role, but it's like
Yeah,
if you
niche. Yeah.
think
A social identity in a sense.
Well, that's the thing.
So-
From how I fix it is I made them thieves and merchants, and like so they have that social. They talk to people. Think about like that cunning rogue who's always like street talking and trying to like be like, as my dad said, you made them all mafia members and Italians. Thank you. So that's kind of.
I mean, a lot of Italians are short to begin with, so.
Oh, I know. It's great. I love my cousins. But no, so it's one of those things where it's like, go ahead.
Oh, completely unrelated. I just want to point out, someone mentioned Dinosaur Planet. Loved that as a kid. Loved Dinosaur.
I love that movie too.
That was peak.
They asked if I'd seen it. Was that?
Yeah, it
He
said,
said,
"Did
check
you
out
check out
Dinosaur
Dinosaur
Planet."
Planet?" It's
I have not
literally
yet.
just
It's still on my list. I'm actually doing classes to become a security guard. It's the worst thing I've ever done. Not because it's hard. It's incredibly boring. That's how it is.
welcome to
it's
the
great. It's you know how last week we were talking about the dinosaurs squawking each other and there's no dialogue? That's what it is. There's no dialogue. It's just them squawking at each other, and every like I don't know, like 20 minutes or something, a guy's like, "And this is how dinosaurs actually have feathers, by the way. That's why we have them have feathers. Please don't yell at us that they're not scaly."
It's awesome.
Yeah,
Wait,
it was
you're
only
thinking
for
of
the
Dinosaur
smaller
Planet? Which
ones.
one are you thinking of?
It's Dinosaur Planet, yeah,
Really?
because they have the Velociraptor have feathers. They don't have.
Oh, I might
like,
be thinking.
everything
I'm probably
else.
thinking of Planet of the Dinosaurs, not Dinosaur
Yeah,
Planet.
maybe I don't know. Like they had like the
Wait.
smaller ones have feathers. They weren't at the level where they're like, yeah, the T-Rex had feathers, but they're like they were still at the level where they're like, the Velociraptor.
Oh
has
yeah,
feathers.
yeah. No.
The,
I know what you're talking about.
like Utah Raptor or whatever has feathers, but they were not at the the T-Rex as giant as it is has feathers pill. They were not.
Yeah,
taken-
that came out in the early 2000s.
Yeah, it
I
came
do
out in
remember it.
2004.
Yeah, that was a fun
Yeah.
documentary.
It's great.
It actually has some of my favorite designs for dinosaurs I've seen in documentaries, so I will give it props to that. But no, I was getting Planet Dinosaur and Planet of the Dinosaurs mixed up.
Is there's something called Dinosaur Planet and Planet of the Dinosaurs?
Yeah, Planet of the Dinosaurs was a
Look.
movie from like the 70s, which was stop motion, very scaly retro dinosaurs, and then Dinosaur Planet was a documentary that came out in 2003.
There's only
Yeah.
so many possible variations on this theme.
Yeah, they're gonna always be going for something dinosaur. Dinosaur and Planet are like in 80 to 90% of of the titles for this stuff because they're like,
Yeah.
what are we gonna do? It's like
Isn't dinosaur?
There's dinosaurs, and it's when the planet had dinosaur planet
Yeah.
dinosaur.
You got your
Was
you got
Planet of the Dinosaurs, was that the stop motion film where the people like went back in time and then at the end they started a society and they had kids?
Yes.
That film screwed me up as a little kid because the stop motion was just realistic enough as a little kid that I was like, oh my god, this is horrific. I'm talking like 5 or 6. Like it messed me up in a good way. I was like, this was scary as heck. These dinosaurs are just eating people. They're eating people.
I think the one thing I
plot's
love
horrible.
about
I watched it again recently.
is I had gotten a DVD copy, which is the 30th anniversary edition of it, and on the
Nice.
cover of it, the ship looks nothing like the ship in the movie. It looks like an X-wing without the extra pair of wings, and I was like, "Yo, am I gonna see an X-wing in a dinosaur stop motion movie?" And I was so disappointed. But the stop motion part is still really good. I do love Planet of the
Actually.
Dinosaurs. I could pull that up for you if you want.
I think I have it up now. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, chat, here we go. Let me just make it a little more readable for y'all. This is the cover he's talking about. Just look at that 30th anniversary cover. If you're a
Let
little
me
kid, that slaps hard.
Oh yeah, no, exactly.
And let's see. Here's the OG cover. I'm not going to change the zooming on it, but yeah. This cover slaps.
That is pretty awesome.
Dinosaur's got like a laser eye, or he's getting shot in the face.
He shot it
and-
with a laser, yeah.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah. It looks
I
so
love-
much cooler.
No, like
And
literally,
widescreen.
that
Yeah.
right there is like
This is the cover
an
that I
aesthetic
remember
I want to
seeing with the
replicate
butt.
with like my settings. Is that
I remember the caveman girl's butt very vividly as a child.
Oh, I wonder why you remember that.
Peaked up,
Real mystery.
I don't
just like
want
my
to.
dad.
Great mystery how I turned out straight. So,
Uh-huh.
It really
Let-
is.
really, but yeah, so that's another great one. But yeah, dinosaur fiction is in a weird state right now.
Mm.
I kind of hate it. Oh, I want to talk about sci-fi stuff. The sci-fi, I
Yeah.
think, has failed dinosaurs completely. Outside of sci-fi that focuses only on dinosaurs. There's never any cool. I never really see any really cool alien dinosaurs. They'll have like a monster that's just like basically a T-Rex, but not, or it'll have 6 legs. And I'm always like, why is it one of the two? Why can't why can't you have a cool dinosaur thing that looks like how a dinosaur from a fantasy setting would be?
Are you familiar with Carnivores at all?
Never heard of them.
Carnivores was done by Action Forums back in the day. It was a 1998 game where essentially you're on an alien planet hunting dinosaurs.
That's neat. Oh, and there's like
Yeah.
Ark too. And
It's
you're
kind
not
of
in
it's
the
like
past
Ark
in
before
right?
Ark. No,
It's
you're like
weird.
yeah, Ark's weird. I actually, even despite being like a big dinosaur fan, I've never picked up Ark. It's never really interested me, as well as I don't really think the designs are all that well inspired or.
Oh, they're
decent
just
anyway.
dinosaurs, but bigger.
Well, they're like Jurassic Park dinosaurs with a few more spines, and that's about it. Yeah.
So, just so you know, because I know Pag is going to blow your mind, Ark takes place like 4,000 years in the future after humanity basically died. So then they made the arcs that we all went to, and they put our minds in it in order to train us for the troubles of going back to Earth. They then put us in a simulation where we had to fight dinosaurs.
Oh,
And also the AI is evil.
That's the premise.
Wait,
Yeah.
that's the premise.
We
for
didn't
Ark?
find out about that until 6 years after the game came out.
That's very
That's
funny.
funny.
Wait,
And it's
wait,
all
wait,
it was
like
in the
lore
future,
dumps throughout
I
the
didn't
setting.
know.
Wasn't
That
there
is-
a TV show too with Ark?
No, they kept trying to, but it kept failing.
Nah, they made one. They made one.
Are you
I don't know
sure?
what it's about.
I
Yes,
remember,
it did. It has
yeah.
lesbians.
It's the
I specifically remember it because people were complaining about the lesbians.
I just remember because I had seen it. The one clip where I think it's like a Giganosaurus bursting
the
through
animated
city
series,
and
it
takes
came out
on
this
2
year.
T-Rexes. Yeah,
Oh, that was this year? That's crazy. I
it
didn't
feels like
That's-
that came out years ago.
That's why I don't
Yeah.
know it. It came out this
Yeah.
year. Yeah, IMDb
Really?
very prominently shows the lesbians. Excellent. Thank you, IMDb.
All right.
Oof. It's lost 89 slots in the popularity ranking this week alone. Arc
Jeez.
stands. It's over. It's so Jover.
How? Literally, how do you lose 89 in 1 week? Like, this show didn't even come out, like, this week. So how do you lose 89 that quick? Like, what? Who's going on? And, like,
The tomatoes were rotten, dude.
They
Yeah.
were rotten.
Yeah.
The only thing I can really say by looking at the cover is the fact that, like, at least the designs for the dinosaurs match with how they are in the games. But, like, I've never was interested in Ark. The fact that that's the plot of Ark that Candor just told me makes me even less interested in.
Well, it gets better.
Even
The new
like-
Ark game that's coming out, where you play as definitely not Vin Diesel, if I recall.
Yeah.
That game is set on Earth after the humans get there. For some reason, they forgot how to make the guns that we crafted in Ark and went back to spears, where they have to fight totally not dinosaurs on actual Earth now.
Just
And
remember, when you have a T-Rex, you will always have family.
So, but
Yes.
why are there now dinosaurs on Earth though?
so that was the
I don't know
apocalypse.
why.
The apocalypse that we created was, they never tell us what it is, but they say, oh, the result of the apocalypse is megafauna reemerged on Earth and wiped out humanity. I'm gonna go on a limb here. I don't care how cool T-Rexes are; they cannot survive a squad of Abrams tanks. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, and what's it called? They can't even survive like handheld guns. Like get like 3 people
Yeah.
with M249s and
Exactly.
you're good.
Also,
well,
that's why Ark. I want to say one thing, Pops. That's why Ark has magic now, and that's why there's like dragons and stuff, because it's supposed to be a simulation. So go ahead, Pops.
Yeah, I was going to say that's why you have to clarify. Like, these are technically not dinosaurs, like you said. You need to have that little detail there just to clarify. Like, hey, listen, I know it's not totally accurate.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing is that like nowadays when it comes to like dinosaurs, there's a lot more dinosaur stories where they have far more realistic dinosaurs, but they're more integrated into the world. But like the logistics of that just makes my head spin because I'm like, someone with like a pretty easily accessible gun is gonna be able to take this thing out with like not much issue. Like in a game like Turok, you see like a dinosaur with like missiles strapped to it. That's fun. But when you're trying to tell me like, oh, the T-Rex somehow magically evolved back and now it's an everyday part of our lives, but it's still super dangerous. I'm like, no, I can probably get a gun and go take care of a T-Rex if I need to.
That reminds me
Yeah,
of the new
animal.
Jurassic Park films, how they said that dinosaurs are the ultimate weapon. And what sucks is they had a great idea. They're like, oh, we're going to send these dinosaurs basically into the Viet Cong tunnels. And the moment I was like, that could probably work relatively well. And it's like, well, how are you going to tell them what to kill? Oh, we're going to take this laser pointer and point it at the guy. And as long as we're pointing at him, the dinosaur will know what to kill. And it's like,
Laser-guided dinosaurs.
It
no,
really
it's not just a laser-guided dinosaur. It's a laser gun. It looks exactly like an assault rifle, except it's got a laser pointer. You know what else you could use that looks like an assault rifle if you have to aim at a guy for a while? A gun.
it's
Yeah,
very
What's also really funny too is that like when it came to that whole system, if they did what they did in the first movie where they had like little things strapped onto the raptors, if you have your little laser thing and you're like essentially controlling its head like a drone, bada bing bada boom, that solves the weird logistic of issue. When you're pointing a gun at someone, you just shoot them. You
That
don't
makes
need
a
the
little too
dinosaur.
much sense.
Yeah,
That makes a little too much sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can have that.
might as well just have a gun, man.
And again,
Yeah.
there's like the only niche they had was we're going to send this thing into terrorist tunnels. But then the problem that they had ran into is Trump became president and just said, "Well, we're not going to clear terrorist tunnels anymore. We're just going to bomb the entire mountain from orbit. Go stay in the tunnels. We'll bury you in it." And drones like immediately evolved to do everything what dinosaurs can do, but better. So it's like, all right, so now because of the Ukraine war, we know that we don't need dinosaurs anymore for go through things.
Remember
like, yeah.
too,
To be fair, I
and
don't
think
think
in
that,
Jurassic World 2 they have that where like a drone can't do this and a drone can't do that.
Yes, that's the
No,
worst part.
The drone can't do
To be fair, that was Jurassic World, not Jurassic World 2, I think. Because Jurassic World 2, that's where they're like, the dinosaurs... I think they had the dinosaur be, like, bulletproof, too. Like, the mega dinosaur they built.
Yeah, the
Why not?
Indominus
Oh,
Rex.
Wait,
yeah.
they have the whole
And they
laser
get killed
point
by a
thing
stupid
no,
bone.
but that's when the hybrid dinosaur in the second one, the big the Indoraptor, right? They trained
Yeah.
it. This,
Yeah, that's the one. That's the only one that's, like, laser focused.
And then the third
So
one,
the rest
Chris,
just kind of let him go.
yeah.
Like, hey, have at him. There's meat in there. Get it.
You hope that they eat the right guys in the Viet Cong tunnels. God forbid you have any hostages in there.
Just close off the tunnel's entrance. There you go.
I hope
Problem
that
solved.
ridiculous.
And again, it's upsetting to me because it's like, you almost had something interesting to say. It's like how the first Iron Man actually has got really interesting things to say about the war in Afghanistan and the whole fact that we keep going back to the sandbox. It's got some great stuff to say about that, wrapped up in a stupid Marvel film. It's like you could have done something here, Jurassic World. You had the makings of starting with something interesting here, but you decided to drop it because you got no talent and no ideas.
That's one thing where I'm actually very interested in what the next one's doing, at least in terms, because it's not carrying over the story from the other 3 films, and it seems like it's very disconnected, but still keeping the premise of what happened from those films.
At the end of the second film, they let dinosaurs go across the world, and at the end of the third film, bugs killed everybody until they didn't.
Yeah.
That's very funny.
By the way, if you've ever seen the third film, they stopped the dinosaur action like 20% before the finale, and they just fight bugs the whole time. Because that's what I want to see in my dinosaur film. Mosquito fighting action.
The locust.
I want to point out a comment. Alex Gomez, you can kill a T-Rex with just a knife if you know what you're doing. That's like saying you can kill an elephant with a knife if you know what you're doing. I don't think you're killing an elephant with a knife.
Technically true. You probably could, but
I don't think you're that guy. I don't think you're that guy. That's all.
Yeah.
Like you directly could be that guy, but I don't think you're that guy.
It would be surprising if you were that guy, Alex Gomez.
Yeah, it'd be very surprising.
Alex Gomez, unless you're actually Turok, I'm sorry, I don't believe you.
Yeah, like I'm
Turok
sure there's like a guy who could do it. Maybe not nowadays, but there was definitely a time when someone could do it. But like,
so if we're actually talking practically,
peak physicality, dude, that dude could do it. But
so
I don't know,
if we're actually talking practicality, 1%. You actually can't do it.
Really?
There's no veins close enough to the surface on an elephant?
No, elephants are in fact so thick that you can't pierce their hide with a 22.
The hide of an elephant is it's going to be a bit much. Like conceptually, yes, you could say there's a guy who could do it in theory, but like every detail would have to be perfectly executed. It's not realistic.
It would take a character from your novel pad.
It's like the law of infinite probability. It's like imagining like, well, someday I'll open up the dryer and all my clothes will be perfectly folded. It's like it doesn't work like that in real life,
Well, that was my point with the dinosaur, with the T-Rex. Like he's like, you could kill with a knife. I'm like, well, I mean, not really.
Not really.
If you jump forward into its mouth, it doesn't bite you, and you cut along the entire thing, the esophagus all the way down through the middle. You probably could kill it and crawl out an hour later.
Like I'm just saying, like this is like saying like you can there's better examples of like why a T-Rex like isn't that useful and like elephants aren't useful anymore in combat. But like just say that, don't say like I can kill it with a knife because like you're not that guy. I don't think there's anyone. I'm not sure anyone is that guy, to be honest. So like,
no, I know this from looking at the hyena video because I've been working on the null video. Hyenas are one of the only creatures with a powerful enough bite to rip through elephant hide, and it was noted.
Really?
Yeah, that means they can bite through like Kevlar stuff essentially.
That's fascinating.
Hyenas have like one of the strongest bite forces of like any living.
Scary.
Yeah,
that's fascinating. I know hyenas were
like hyenas are like gator level of biting.
Yeah, hyenas.
Well,
are
I mean,
just
considering they're
below
able to bite. When you said they could bite through elephants, I'm like, well, I guess they're like gator level.
So little hint for later chat. Just keep this in your heart and mind. It's a little spoiler for those of you here. I get to talk about how the Ethiopians are convinced the hyenas are all Jewish in my next video.
Oh my goodness, you're gonna talk about the freaking. Please tell me it's Enoch.
I know why.
Is it Enoch or no?
Nope.
Well,
when I get in there, it's completely unrelated to it. It's something stupider.
Then Enoch? I don't know about that.
Enoch is non-canonical and weird. The thing that I'm talking about is weird.
No, you don't understand. It's canonical specifically for Ethiopians and Eritreans who are just discount Ethiopians. So it's not canonical for literally everyone else except the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians are like, I'm owning this.
Wow, what, they all just look alike, Des?
I mean, they're literally
I firmly
right
believe
next to each
that
other. They're literally right next to each other, and they were controlled by the same people. So yeah, but for them, yes, they are the same.
Des, give yourself some credit. I firmly believe that you could just on site pick out the difference between an Eritrean and an Ethiopian, just immediately on site.
Wait, hang on. Is it not pronounced Eritrean?
It probably is, but
no. There's no way it's Eritrean. It's got to be Eritrean. It's got to be Eritrean.
I do not know how I am with pronouncing things. Okay?
I will throw myself off the
words
Empire
that I
State
have not heard spoken to me. And you're out of your mind if you think that Atreians have come up like ever in a conversation where like I've heard that spoken to me. I've seen it written down. I haven't seen it like spoken.
I'm just because at first I was like I didn't know who specifically you were referring to. I believe it's a Retrian.
It probably is. I don't know.
Please,
I'm
God,
not
no.
gonna paint
All right, hang on, everybody. Ready? All right, chat, listen up. Guys in the call, you'll have to wait a second. Google's going to tell us how to pronounce it.
Oh my goodness.
Let's see. Can I play it? Here we go.
Who are you going to believe, me or Google?
I'm gonna.
Yeah, that's the
believe
American.
what
Here's how the British pronounce it.
Eritreans.
Who cares how the British pronounce it?
Yeah, I was totally right.
Eritreans.
I mean, he's got a point. Why do we care what the Brits think?
Yeah.
Eritrean.
Eritreans.
Yeah. Much better pronunciation. Much
Thank
better.
you for that. Then I did not know.
All right. So yeah. So back to dinosaurs.
Is it actually Eritrean? Because I was trying to listen to it and you guys kept on talking all over
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it's
Three
Eritrean.
times.
Oh, we're
It's
so
Eritrean.
back.
I couldn't even
back.
hear it when you played it, kid. I'm gonna be real. But could other people?
It
Not-
just went up and you guys were talking over it a bit. So
Beautiful.
Tough.
Anyway,
tough-
you can
all that
trust
matters
me.
is I was correct based on
Yeah.
vibes. I like looked at that word and I'm like, that's close enough to Eritrean. That looks like how that's pronounced.
Eritrean just sounds better. If they pronounced it any other way, they would be wrong. You know, I would fly to Eritrea and I'd
So-
be like, I'm sorry, we need to talk about
To get this podcast somewhat back on track, Eritrea is near an island called Scutria. Scutria has these things called, I think it's called the Isle of the Dragon, if I recall.
Oh,
Yeah.
are there dragons?
They have a
Be there
special,
dragons?
kind of, they have a very special, let me see if I can find a picture of the tree here. It's really awesome, and when you cut into it, the sap's called dragon's blood. I don't know why. I couldn't find out, but I just know that that's what the trees like give you.
It's
That's
probably
a fun fact.
to theorize. I
Anyway,
would,
Scutria
is-
dragon blood tree.
it
is-
probably has something to do with
is-
that dragon bones are under the ground and then they blossom into the trees or something. I don't know.
Another interesting thing too is that this type of tree and that entire landscape, like that's very common that you see in a lot of paleo documentaries because of the lack of grass and the like.
It's funny because this tree specifically, the Draconi cinnabari, as it's scientifically named, only grows on Scutria. Even though you see this everywhere in
That's
like you said, fantasy and stuff. It's only on Scutria.
Oh, that one? That is like everywhere.
Yeah.
Let me get him.
He's such a cute little guy. Oh
It's
my
looks like a
goodness.
mushroom tree. It's really cool.
He's got like grass on the top. Oh my god.
What was the thing about Ethiopians and Jews? Because like I'm still not sure if that's like
There
crazy.
are
No, it's hyenas. It's hyenas.
I'm
and-
sorry, it's
It's how the
hyenas.
Ethiopians think the Jews are hyenas, and you'll learn about that later.
Wait.
Well,
They
I'm
think
just
the Jews are
wondering-
hyenas and not the hyenas are Jews? Because this is
Both.
different. Oh.
Okay, I just want to
Huh.
ask Kid, do you think this is like crazier
True?
or less crazy than the Enoch thing?
Oh.
This is more crazy. This is
Okay.
This is an unfounded. How do I put this? Only people who have an IQ level that is the average of the region could come up with something like this.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah, brother.
Are we sure? Are you sure you haven't? I've just heard crazy things about Enoch, so I'm like, I'm
Okay,
I'm
look,
a
dude. If
little-
you go, if the Book of Enoch is weird and wild and has some crazy stuff like having sex with angels in it. That's weird and
Yeah.
all, but like that's not weird if you look at Revelations. Revelations has some whacked out stuff too. So if you look at that in totality, you're like, yeah, I can see some weird stuff happening in the Bible. Like it still feels about right. There's a reason that it's not thrown out with like the Gospel of Judas, or it's just like, no, this is just whack. This is just bunk. Or like
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's thrown out with everyone but the Ethiopians. So like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying though. But
Is
like,
there like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church that is like,
Yes.
nah, this is...
yeah,
the Ethiopian Orthodox Church literally accepts every single text as canonical.
Interesting.
I love that. That is incredible.
Yeah, they
Every
say-
text?
Every
Yeah,
single
the
text that
Ethiopian like church is very interesting.
yeah, it's got some. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church is probably the most interesting of all the non-mainstream Christian sects out there. Like if you look outside the ones that became European and what we have in America, they have some crazy stuff. In fact, I fully believe they have the Ark of the Covenant in their little temple because just there's a temple that
Is
they
that what
have.
claim?
there's a temple that they have where they say you can't go in here. Anybody who goes in here is killed. One priest is only allowed in here. No, we don't have the Ark of the Covenant. However, there's multiple stories about them taking the Ark of the Covenant into the temple. The fact that the temple is kind of like, no, we can't tell you if we have it. But every other place that has a claim to it's like, oh, we definitely have it. These guys like, no, you can't have it, and no, you can't see it. It's like, hang on a second.
That reminds me of, remember that movie Year One with Jack Black? The entire concept of the Holy of Holies, where it's like, you can't go in there, and then he goes in there and he's like, well, I didn't die.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things like that.
And I did not die. What are we talking about here?
We're going to go back
We're
into
talking about Ethiopia.
Dragon Blood and how it relates to dinosaurs.
Yeah. Are dragons dinosaurs?
Yes.
Question mark? Exclamation point?
Michael Crichton, he had a great book. I believe I brought it up on the 2 weeks ago, that first podcast. It was called Dragon Teeth, and it was about how there was like a competitive thing in the 1800s going out west and digging up dinosaur bones. And obviously it was just called Dragon Teeth because it's like, back in the day, the idea that like they dug up these huge bones and they didn't know where they came from, said they were big animals that must have died before, in the flood and couldn't fit on the ark. And they looked at them, they were like, well, it looks like a reptile, a big reptile, it must be a dragon.
Mhm.
So like the idea of dinosaur bones having belonged to dragons back in the day has always kind of pervaded the mindset of people that found them.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. That was the prevailing theory of the 1870s when that book takes place. It specifically takes place during the Bone Wars between Othniel
Yes.
Chalmers Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope, and that was what was referred to as the Bone War. It's mostly like a cowboy thriller with the backdrop of like digging up fossils during that time. But like that whole period of paleontology is interesting because like most of the iconic species that you think of, like Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus, all come from that time period.
That, but the actual people and the personalities digging up the bones are almost as interesting as the dinosaurs themselves at this time.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, Cope and Marsh are so interesting as people.
Yeah. It's interesting. You look into when they first discovered things like that, and people were saying, well, these were animals that existed, prehistoric or whatever. And I think the church had issue with that. They were telling them like they had sacrilegious and everything. Like there was a lot going into it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, what's it called? Do you know what the first dinosaur was actually called?
the Digisaurus?
Couldn't tell you. Go ahead.
Scrotum humanum.
Scrotum humanum. That's awesome.
Yeah. So,
Really?
the piece of a dinosaur bone, it was like the end of like a leg bone. And because that end of that part of the bone literally just looks like a pair of nuts, that's why they called it scrotum humanum. And this was before Megalosaurus, the first dinosaur, was ever properly identified.
The ball
Hey,
bone.
what do you think that this
It was
dinosaur
balls.
would look like? Balls.
Balls.
Hey, it definitely is a scrotum.
Yeah, no, show it on stream.
I'm showing. Don't you worry, my friend.
A fossilized scrotum from before time.
Oh my goodness.
There are certain species of animals today that have bones in their genitals.
Bro, look at these fossilized nuts.
Here you go, chat. Here's the scrotum humanum, the first and most important dinosaur bone ever discovered.
Yeah, you thought your dick was hard.
Exactly. Yeah, so there you go. This,
Excellent.
Oh wow.
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I see the confusion now.
Yeah. Those science. I mean, they were spot on. they got
They
the veins
cooked.
and everything. Yeah.
That reminds me of was it the unicorn of Magdeburg? Is it
Think?
Oh, say again.
the Magdeburg, the worst dinosaur ever? Yeah. Here you go, chat. This is the worst dinosaur recreation of all time. A lot of people have been stupid with the way they built dinosaurs, but this thing is this. If you ever had to prove dinosaurs are a fiction that nobody has any idea and it's all a lie, this is your proof right here. This was a scientifically thought of like reconstruction for decades. They thought this was real. They thought they built this and they're like, we did it, boys. We have achieved dinosaur.
Bro, we've made
Really,
it.
that's fascinating. Like, I'm
Yeah, I
just
need to
wondering,
cut off
like,
chat for a little bit so you can see it, guys. There you go. Look at that stupid thing. Look at
they're
that
not even
goofy idiot.
trying with that one. Like,
You
what
know,
are they? They're not
I
even trying.
I
Yeah, no, that's silly.
it's kind of how you ever
Really like
seen
this
those?
guy? This scientific recreation of what it looks like. I'm sorry, Pops. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Unless
yeah,
they like thought it was like a water thing. Like that's the only
No.
way I could even begin to. No, like I know they didn't, but like that's what I'm saying. Like if they thought it was water, I could like kind of see it. Pops, you say stuff because I know I just interrupted you. I'm just
yeah.
baffled.
Basically, I think it's just another symptom of the fact that like dinosaur fossils that have been dug up. There has never been a complete like skeleton found, and so people have just come up with a little bit wilder theories on what they're going to be built like and everything. It's kind of you ever see those memes of like you know scientists 1,000 years from now discover the skeleton of like a hippopotamus, and based on how the skull looks, they would think it looks like a completely different creature.
Actually,
Yeah.
what's interesting too about
That's
Pops
like the perfect
is
example.
Well-
The hippopotamus one is the perfect example.
yeah, definitely. The thing with that is that meme originates from a dinosaur book by C.M. Kozeman
Yeah.
called All Yesterdays. And as much as like I find the meme funny, I'm not a big fan of C.M. Kozeman, if I'm going to be honest with everyone. And I don't really think All Tomorrows is all that interesting of a book either. But when it comes to dinosaurs too, there really isn't any at all analogs for almost all dinosaur species. So seeing skeletons of something that you have no reference for at all and they're fragmentary, you're gonna come out with like a lot of problems with what you get. Whereas like one of the ones he shows is like a baboon. If like we didn't know what a baboon looked like, if in modern day there weren't any baboons around, but we had apes around and we saw the skeleton of a baboon, even if it was fragmentary, there's enough inference that you can get from a modern day analog to where you can construct a monkey from another monkey. Whereas with dinosaurs, you just don't get that luxury.
You do have the meme on screen in case anybody's wondering. It is the hippo.
Oh, you found it. Good, good. Yeah, dude, that's interesting. Zim, I'm sure you know the story about how the Gigantopithecus was first theorized. It was literally just the molar, right? Just
Mhm.
and they said this. It's like it looks like a simian or kind of like an ape-like tooth, and they recreated this entire thing based on the scale of how big it was.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of it's a lot of like incomplete stuff and theorizing and everything, but it's almost what makes it fun and interesting to think about it.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Like another good example for paleontology is like Leopleurodon, where at the time of walking with dinosaurs, based on some fragmentary material they had, they thought that this animal was like 25 meters in length. And in the documentary, they have it like this giant, essentially Godzilla, like snatching a dinosaur out off the land and dragging it into
Oh,
the
I know
sea.
it. Yeah.
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 That was
When in like reality, it's not much bigger than like an orca, for example.
cool.
That's fair.
Don't worry,
Orcas
chat.
are still pretty.
I got
stupid,
memes for you guys while they talk, chat. Don't worry.
Next.
though. I still wouldn't want to run into an orca.
Oh, definitely no. Orcas are
Orcas
scary.
orcas are
Now, see,
interesting. You never
I don't think
know
if you had a knife, I think you win 0 out of 1 million times against an orca.
no, orcas are like the apex predator.
Yeah.
Of the world. Yeah, they will take out whatever they want. And what's funny about them though is that they're intelligent enough. There's stories about them helping humans, even in the wild and everything. So that's another tangent. But yeah, they're awesome. They're very interesting.
So wait, just to be clear though, we are saying dragons are dinosaurs.
I would say
I mean, they kind of
no.
they take the same role, but I wouldn't say they're the same. Like they're clearly not the same. But they take
Why
the
I
same
chat?
role.
This is my favorite dinosaur meme of all time. Continue, guys.
It's just that in real life, like the idea that giant bones were discovered, people said this must have been a dragon. Like it's not really proven how dragons ever came to be conceptualized, but the idea that dinosaur bones were found across the planet throughout history, people are just kind of like, well, maybe back in the day, this is how the idea of a dragon came to be. It's not really
Yeah.
no.
I think that like generally when it comes to dragons, there was always a perception as to what they were, and I think that a lot of that comes from encounters with real animals. And with dinosaurs, um, they fit aesthetically like what dragons are, and as a result, people look back and say, "Oh, dragons look like dinosaurs. They must have seen dinosaur bones." One example of this is, I think it was Octavian. I'm forgetting which
I think
Roman
it was
emperor it is.
Octavian. I've read
Where
about this. Which is why I
he
was
had
actually
a
gonna
like
bring it up.
villa on this one island that is stated to have found like giant bones as part of his collection, and some people have assumed it was like dinosaur bones, but the Latin that was used was specifically referencing sea monsters. And now with like more recent studies, we found out that Rome actually had a thriving, not really thriving, but at least they were whaling to a degree, and more than likely the bones that were in his collection were actually whale bones. And I think that like like mimetically people will hear stories of like, oh, knights fought dinosaurs, like Kajinot says in the chat right there. And then you have things like Primeval, which is a really fun show from the UK, where they have a dinosaur that got displaced and is fighting a knight, and the dinosaur just so happens to look like a classical medieval dragon.
So, that being said, when you see a dinosaur in a piece of, or not a dinosaur, when you see a dragon in a piece of media, are you thinking in your head that's a type of dinosaur? Is it a type of dinosaur?
So
I don't think it's a
I would
type
say
of
yes
that,
and
like,
no.
dinosaur, but I think
It's
it's
yes
really
and no. I'd agree too. I would say like if you're a more grounded world, I would say that yeah, dragon very much could be a type of dinosaur.
I actually want to
like
even before that.
world,
Are
no.
your dragons sentient? Is step one.
yes, absolutely. It depends
Oh
on the
yeah, I guess that's true. Because if it's one of those, if it's like Smog from
The
what's
Hobbit.
it called? Yeah, The Hobbit. Like then it's
Uh,
clearly not like in the.
Yeah, but the Game of
That's
Thrones
where, like,
dinosaurs, the Game of Thrones dragons are probably dinosaurs.
Yeah,
Well, there
the
are
Game of-
dinosaurs in Game of Thrones.
yeah, because they're
That's
more
awesome.
they're more like naturally occurring animals that are more they're
Yeah.
more nature more so than a sentient being with like they hoard gold, they have intent in their actions, they can speak and everything.
Well,
It's
I
it totally
don't know about that because I think you can have a dragon that like still hoards gold, but it's not sentient.
Like
Like,
a
yeah, you
giant
can-
magpie.
Yeah, something like
well,
that. Yeah.
yeah, I guess.
I do agree that most of the
But
time, and I
that-
guess maybe I'm mainly just thinking of Smog, but
Or
like
maybe
I
they eat
do
them.
agree that like the conscious ones like typically are going for the gold more than the non-conscious ones.
Hey, you know what? Let me say real quick, just because the word sentient, do we mean more so like sapient rather than
Yeah, probably
sentient?
sapient. Yeah.
Sapiens
Yeah.
probably better.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's like the same thing as like a lizard man is still a lizard. It's just a lizard that's sapient in appearance and sentience in its cognitive abilities. So like dragons could be an offshoot of dinosaurs in a fantasy setting's evolutionary history, and they just so happen to be like the most evolved type of dinosaur to the point that not only have they developed sentience, but also like a completely different physiology to dinosaurs that we know of.
So
Okay.
true.
Here's the real
Anyways,
chat question.
Uh-huh.
It's going to break everybody. So, if we agree that if you have sapiens, that it's no longer a dinosaur, it's a dragon, are the dinosaurs in Dinotopia now dragons?
Yes.
No.
I definitely
No, they're
say
just
because
talking
with
dinosaurs.
how cognate they are, like they're much more dragon-like than they are dinosaur-like in their role, typically.
I would say in their role they're more dragon-like, but they still fit the platonic image of a dinosaur.
I mean,
Yeah,
they look like dinosaurs because they were drawn as dinosaurs.
Yeah,
I'm not
exactly.
disagreeing there, but like
Yeah.
in terms of their role, they're far more dragon-like than they are than like typical dinosaur roles.
It
Well, I don't know.
behaves-
I think dragons kind of need magic. I think the presence of magic kind of defines a dragon. Like takes it apart. I think the sapience helps, but I think if you had a magical creature that was dragon-esque that was not sapient because of its magicalness, it would then be a dragon instead of a dinosaur.
Yeah,
Right.
well, the other thing too is that there's also like those low fantasy settings that like will have dragons not have any magic tied to them, and every single magical element of them is explained by some underlying science. And then
Are there
you also have
settings?
dinosaurs in other settings where they like can be like you can have totemic dinosaurs, like a Dinomancer, where like it's a druid that essentially just calls on dinosaurs as its magic.
Mhm.
Yeah.
If you're if you're calling on dinosaurs with your magic, then the dinosaurs themselves are not inherently magical.
In a
It-
sense, but like if like for example the idea that like magic permeates the world similar to like something like the Force, then like everything to a degree is magic.
Yeah, but I don't know.
I know
don't
what
think
you're
that's,
saying. I'm just pulling it as far as we can go just for the
Yeah,
sake of
yeah.
discussion.
I got you.
Yeah.
So the idea is like, they can use powers that, like, let's say they seem like magic, but they can be explained as far as like pieces of natural physiology.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not like, you wouldn't call it magic in the to the extent that in the way that like they can use it intentionally and say like, I cast such and such spell. Like it's not like that. It's more like they use some sort of part of their physiology, like the breathing
Mhm.
fire, for example. You can explain that scientifically rather than having it be like a magical
can't breathe.
ability.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
one example I can think of is in Goblin Slayer, the anime. The lizard shaman, his abilities to like summon undead or summon weapons, all of his spells, he calls on different dinosaurs as part of his like his incantation.
I
And
have
there's
not.
also living dinosaurs in the world too in the recent chapters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I'd say that doesn't that wouldn't count then.
Okay.
The thing has to be inherent because it's like in D&D, like everything is made of magic at base. So it's like yeah, a lake is made of magic in D&D, but a lake isn't magical just because the setting is infused with magic. And it would
Yeah.
be the same with its natural creatures.
Fair enough.
I think it has to do with the idea of the kind of sapience like we were talking about again. It's like, can you call it magic if it's just a part of nature or not? Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say so.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah,
magic
not
has to be
quite.
supernatural, like that's almost the definition of magic is supernatural.
Gotcha. Yep.
So yeah. Oh.
But yeah, dragons are definitely more interesting if you have them be intelligent creatures with magical powers and everything. They
For
are.
sure.
I think like, excuse me, to go back to the dinosaur or Dinotopia thing, I would not call them dragons, just for the simple fact that like you can look at them and say that's a dinosaur versus you can look at a
Mhm.
dragon and say, that's a dragon.
Mhm.
I think I don't think there's that much overlap just in appearance that you could really make the argument.
Yeah. As well as like it's almost like a when you see it type of thing, because like even in Baldur's Gate there's a talking dinosaur in Baldur's Gate 3, and then there's also dragons in there too.
So I
You know
think
what?
there can be sapient dinosaurs that are not dragons, though.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
I feel like, I think maybe now the definition of dragon is getting very, very narrow, like very narrow. Because surely to be a dragon, something has to be dragon shaped.
Mhm.
I agree.
But then you've
Yeah.
got like wingless dragons. So you've got like Chinese dragons, just big old tubes.
Worms.
Big old
No,
tube
you don't even
noodles.
want to bring up dragon discussion. I'm going to kill everybody who talks about dragons. They all talk about it wrong. Wyverns, dragons, drakes. All these classifications are wrong. There's no actual descriptions of them. You're all stupid and should die. I've been stuck in this discussion since Tumblr died in 2000 because all the people who had these classifications for dinosaurs came from there, and they've been infecting the rest of the fantasy community, trying to tell me that let me see if I can find this stupid chart. I'm sorry, this is one of my pet peeve things. I hate this with a passion.
You do that. You do
Oh no,
that.
I understand the feeling. I remember when I was younger, I used to be one of those kinds of people. Now for me, in terms of like the classifications, it comes down to like certain things have like pretty hard and fast names. So I'm like, with a Hydra, it's very clear what a Hydra is supposed to be. With a dragon or a wyvern, depends on like what I want to call it. I think
Yes.
with like wyverns, I like the name wyvern over dragon in a lot of cases, so I'll say wyvern, and I like how wyverns look in a lot of cases. But yeah, what Candor showing on screen, a lot of this is like bunk really, just because
FYI,
in a
this
lot
is
of
the
cases-
simplified version of this.
Yeah, a lot of people also like will do this.
Wait,
only
one
because they
second.
wanna
One
have
last
everything
thing,
in
Zim.
there.
Somebody in the chat's going to say, "Oh, what do you mean this is simplified?" Here's the full version. We're not looking at this. We're going to the simplified one.
Well, I mean, if someone
Oh,
wants to use this, then why not?
There's a
I'm
difference
glad-
between I want to use it in my fantasy setting and you telling me it's gospel. That's the
Yeah.
problem I have with
Yeah,
it.
that's fair.
Yeah.
If
a
someone
lot
tells
of
you that
people
you
will
need
say
to do
that, yeah.
X,
Holy crap!
Yeah, you saw the
let me-
big one.
Well,
Yeah.
Candor, you know what's really funny is I think I've seen an even bigger one of those at one point.
Oh yeah, there's
we've
big.
all seen a bigger one.
Yeah, they get even more autistically
Always a
like broken
bigger
apart.
fish.
It's stupid. It's like just because this started because of the Skyrim dragons. Because there's been arguments for years that they're actually wyverns because they don't have 4 legs. That doesn't matter. They're dragons. Because they have the bat-like hands, they have to be wyverns. That's not a thing. D&D made that a thing because D&D has to sell you books. And to sell you books, they need to put new art in the books. So they have to give you new things to pay for, new things to look at. So they can't just call all the crap dragons when it all should be a dragon. I would disagree with the way the Lindworm is in this picture, but the person who made this had to give a classification for it. And it's so frustrating that whenever you whenever I see people say, hey, I have a dragon in my setting, it might not even have wings on it, and he gets beaten down by people who are like, no, that's a drake. That's a Lind dragon. Yeah. We start arguing, demanding he changes it. I'm like, dude, screw you guys. Like, it's a dragon. It's lizard, breathe fire, fly, dragon, done.
What?
Shut up.
It
Yeah.
You
really
have to breathe fire.
By
It's
this
anyway.
classification, Smog isn't a dragon because usually,
Yes.
like he doesn't have he's got the hand wings thing of like a bat versus
Yeah, so that's
Do you
that's
have the
actually
hand wings?
that's so Game of Thrones they
Game of Thrones would also be drag.
they used bats. They used like bats structurally as kind of the model for the way they made the dragons. We all recognize those as dragons. Like
You know
I
what's really funny about that too is the fact that there are wyverns in A Song of Ice and Fire, and they are the only difference between them is that they're smaller than dragons, and they don't breathe fire.
really
That's the funny thing.
Wyverns, if you want to be really accurate, wyverns should spit poison and acid. The acid dragon from D&D should just be called a wyvern. If you want to be completely accurate, because that's what
now
Beowulf
you're
fights.
making it up. Oh,
No, I'm saying if
gee.
you wanted to tell me here's the difference, it's because the wyvern comes from Norse tales, and in Norse tales they don't breathe fire. They spit poison and acid. That's the only actual difference between wyvern and dragon. Otherwise, they're the same thing. Big, angry lizard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every culture independently conceived of dragons in different ways, and they're all dragons. Like,
I don't know about that. I don't know if the I don't know. When you look at like the Chinese dragon, like I that's not too much of a dragon.
a
That's like
flying tube dragon. Look,
a serpent.
but
yeah.
the thing is,
I'm
then,
just saying that's stretching the definition of dragon. Like I get we call it a dragon, but that's just like that's a completely different.
I think the one thing when it
so
comes
where do we
to,
draw the line?
Well, the thing I've always found is that fiction influences how we perceive reality. I think when it comes to the idea of the word dragon, it meant something specific to a specific culture, and then as we communicated with other cultures, we saw other things that we translated into like our language, and
That's
in
what
this
I
case,
kinda
dragon
mean.
just became universalized as a term for other creatures that we could kind of fit into a general definition of big angry lizard, which is why you see things like Quetzalcoatl, Chinese dragons, the Kirin, for example. Like if you look at a Kirin doesn't look like any dragons that we see. It's essentially a giant horse. But
Pretty much.
we all call these things dragons, and I think because people have grown up with this more Tumblr-y definition actually thing going on
This is
in
the first time
world.
I've ever even heard of Kirin's. And be real, this is literally the first time I have ever seen these things.
Yeah, the
wild,
only reason
aren't
why
they?
I heard about Kirins is because of Monster Hunter.
No, Kirins.
And they're considered
So,
what's it called? An
No,
elder
Pop, it's
dragon.
Kirins. Kirin.
Let's check just lizard horses, big lizard horses.
Yeah, they're great.
Interesting.
They're awesome.
Are
I'm
these
really
in your game?
because I was gonna
They are in
bring
my
up.
game. You haven't found them yet. Go ahead, Pops.
I lied to be honest.
Go ahead,
I
Des.
don't know what I was thinking of, but I was not thinking of Chinese/Japanese dragons. They're close enough. I was
You're thinking of koalas in Quetzalcoatl specifically, probably.
I
Quetzalcoatl
probably was.
specifically, I wanted to bring up as it's the giant sun serpent from what is it, Aztec or
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, heck.
Yeah, so that one was interesting because before you even pulled up the chart, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I wish Tio was here, our boy Tio Sipakli, so that we could ask him whether he considered Quetzalcoatl to be a dragon. But I think it's almost like like those old maps where like there's whited out regions, there's blank things, and it's like here be dragons, monsters. it plays into the idea that like this is a otherworldly kind of beast of the unknown. So dragon kind of became a popular term for just a kind of a, you know, an otherworldly kind of mysterious thing that you don't know what it is quite. Which is why I'm glad Zim brought that up as well. That kind of it. What's the word I'm trying to think? Like culturally ingrained, it became kind of
a cultural catch-all.
Yeah, exactly. The term.
Like, kind of going back to the subject of dinosaurs, in a way, dinosaurs are just kind of secular dragons in that sense, because that's what a lot of old dinosaur fiction was. It was essentially here there be dragons in terms of coming to these new locations.
So, two things. I want to talk. Alex is right in chat. It's Huitzilopochtli is actually the sun god, and Quetzalcoatl's the feathered serpent. But that's in Aztec. There's other Mesoamerican beliefs where he's still related to stuff around there. We'll have to get Tio on here so we can fist fight you about that, Alex. Don't worry. But the other thing is, this thing here, this dragon classification, where we have to have these rigid forms, this is why fantasy sucks nowadays. This not just the dragon itself, the idea that you take something and categorize it and put it into boxes like this and it has to do these things. This is why fantasy blows, because all the best fantasy, go back and read the old fantasy novels, even sci-fi novels, a lot of the best ones, they kind of like, look dude, shut up, I don't care, this is the part I want to talk about. Come with me and we're going to talk about this part. The worst fantasy novels that we get nowadays, the worst sci-fi novels, they have a need to explain everything, to tell you what's going on. And it's details that do not matter, and they are restricting their own creativity for that. It is so infuriating whenever I open a new fantasy novel and it's just another shitty, generic D&D ripoff. I don't care about your setting. Or they'll do something like, oh, our people all live in giant floating spheres of water, and they like subsist on the inside. If they leave the bubbles, they die. Like, okay, that is so radical and wild. What do they do with that? Oh, they sit inside and talk about their feelings all day because this is just a soap opera that I have one cool setting element for. It's so infuriating.
I think another thing too,
is vital to know Aragon's tax policy. How am I supposed to know if I'm supposed to root for him?
If you don't listen, that's something I wanted to bring up just conceptually. The idea that, like, yes, like you for the chat, the listeners, anyone who wants to world build their own little, concept of a story and everything. If you think of something wild, like, for example, halflings riding dinosaurs, was what made me think of this. Like, if you want to take something wild like that, go for it. Run with it. Like, they make it your own thing. Like, have fun with it, please. Like, you don't need to go autistically into detail about everything. Things can be the way that they are, and the story can be good.
That. The only thing you need to explore is that thing. If your story's about halflings riding dinosaurs, like Pop said, that's awesome. Tell me about that. Explain to me the culture. What are the dinosaurs? Why don't they ride stegosauruses? Do they not ride meat eaters because they don't like them? Do they only ride meat eaters? I don't care. Look, just tell me about that. That's what I want to learn about. I cannot give a flying shit what the elves of the Kingdom Over think about, because they're just the guys that the halflings are fighting. All I need to know about them is they're fighting them. That's it. Stop wasting your time explaining the other things about your generic elves, your generic dwarfs. I'm here for the cool part. Tell me the cool part that I'm here for.
I think another thing too is, like, to tie it back to dinosaurs is, have you guys all seen Primal or no?
No.
Parts of it, like one or two scenes, yeah.
Okay. Have you guys for the people who have seen it, have you seen the first episode or no? Or like some of the first episodes fight?
A bit of it. I think Pops, you've seen a bit of it too. Because I think we watched the same video on it.
Okay. Yeah, so like this ties like really much to people who want to do dinosaurs in their setting. A lot of people have this big issue where they need to include certain species or make sure they're hyper specific to whatever the most modern day depiction of these animals are. With Fang, the main kind of green T-Rex, she doesn't have all the same anatomical features in terms of like what a T-Rex is supposed to look like. She is the conception of what a T-Rex should be. And in that same episode, they're fighting giant kaiju-sized red T-Rexes with horns on their heads. There's no Tyrannosaurs that have horns on their heads that look like that. There's no Tyrannosaurs that are that size. There is a style and aesthetic that the episode is going for with its creatures, and I think that it's far more important that you adhere to what you are attempting to do and what style you are going for, rather than trying to explain to me the ins and outs of how a tyrannosaur evolved to have horns and hunt in this environment. That is interesting if you were talking to me and like I'm your best friend, but like it's not gonna make the story more interesting. Like going back to the halfling dinosaur writing example, I'd care more about a specific halfling and his specific dinosaur and the adventures they go on and what that halfling thinks and how it interacts with the world, rather than the ecological history of how this specific raptor looks the way it does.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter as much as the actual writing itself.
I would say in those cases, for sure, the story should come first. You know what I mean? Like you can go back and explain it later if you want. And I believe the idea of like, making something basically look like a big tyrannosaur. It's almost like that's just a part of like making it marketable. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
On that specific point, the thing I want to reinforce is don't gloss over the details of the thing you want to explore. The other side of the coin is don't go off in the la-la land where you just think you can write anything and it's just going to stick. You need to, if you're going to tell me, Candor, my story is halflings riding dinosaurs. I expect that to be all the exposition. That's the majority of what I want to learn. The characters are still here too, but anything I learn about your world should be related to the dinosaur part of it and the halfling part of it. I'm going to give one big example. Dungeon Meshi, or Delicious in Dungeon, or whatever you want to call it. Great little anime. I enjoyed the absolute hell out of it. Me and my dad loved it. All we know about the world is what directly affects the dungeon. Why? Because I'm directly caring about the dungeon. The few scenes that take place out of the dungeon are about people talking about the dungeon. That's all that matters. Nothing else matters. There's a dwarven kingdom somewhere. They don't matter until the dwarves engage the dungeon. And our dwarf character tells us about them. Because that's what matters. Because it's the dungeon. We're here for the dungeon. And nothing is so frustrating because they could have spent so much time wasting just our life explaining all the stupid kingdoms around us and why the political situations matter. Well, it's about a bunch of idiots digging in the dungeon who shouldn't be there. It's like the whole premise is, guys, we're not going to make it to this dungeon alive. Well, let's try anyway. So that's what the whole plot should be focused on. And we're going to cook monsters along the way, of course.
It's that, and it's like, who do our characters know? Because basically the only reason we find out about the Japanese guy being basically the prince is so we can get the cat girl on the team, like.
And the Japanese guy hanging out with them, that's a character. That's their next friend. You have a whole dynamic there if he is, I don't want to spoil anything.
The thing is, like, I don't know that you shouldn't explain. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you should explain that might not be directly related to your central plot. But I think what you should explain is anything that the reader sees. Anything the viewer is going to see that needs to be explained.
There's a way to do it, but sometimes it feels like a lot of the time. Now I don't watch a lot of television, but it's more like with reading and stuff. You run into issues every once in a while where it feels like somebody's giving you not quite an exposition dump, but it's just like a little bit too much context that it almost takes you out of the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I want to cite? The Lord of the Rings movie. Hang on one sec, Pops. I'm building on your point. The Lord of the Rings movie, everybody bitches and says, it opens with the lore dump. It does not. If you watch the Lord of the Rings movie, it is not dumping lore. It is telling you everything you need to know to get into it. What 100% of what's used in the opening is used in the movies. Everything is. Yeah. Why the dwarves collapse? Because of the rings. It's just...
It's also extremely compressed, honestly. The amount of information.
I did not get the feeling that it was a lore dump when I watched it. No.
And it's just because if I were to rewrite the opening of Lord of the Rings worse, it would talk about Beren and Luthien, which is, honest to God, if you really want to know what the point of the entirety of Tolkien's setting was, it's Beren and Luthien, and I want to talk about languages. Because all Beren and Luthien is the same story that happens 9 times. This is what Aragorn and Arwen is too. About, me and my wife fell in love. My wife's the coolest girl who ever lived. Ha ha, my wife is better than all your girls. And every girl in Lord of the Rings is basically Luthien, and Luthien is his wife. It's like, dude, come on. That's all he writes every time you see any love story. It's the same thing. But that if he was trying to get a high-minded thing, if he was a modern-day writer, he would open with telling us about Beren Luthien and the Cimmerals and Morgoth's fall and how that led to Sauron. That doesn't matter at all for the story we're going with.
The Cimmerillion does exist. So.
That's the thing is that,
it's there, but it doesn't show up at all. There's not a single mention of it in Lord of the Rings. Because we don't need it, except for somebody oh man, we haven't had this Sauron's fight since the Cimmerals with Morgoth, right, guys?
Yeah, but all I'm
But-
saying
Yeah,
is
they're-
he did write the Silmarillion. Like,
The thing too
that's
is that the Silmarillion is its own book, but the other thing
Yes.
too is that if you wanted to learn about other details that are only tangentially related to the story, there's a reason why Tolkien made the appendices. You can
Exactly.
read the appendices, but they are not. You do not need to read the appendices to understand Lord of the Rings.
Why do you
Same
think
thing as
George-
like.
Go ahead.
Oh no, go.
I was going to say, why do you think George R. R. Martin stopped writing the last 3 books and has written 3 different world Bibles since then? Because that's the part that he wants to explore, and he doesn't want to take the time to write stories exploring that. If you want to write world Bibles, go for it. That is a fantastic thing. There's a lot of fun there. You can get some great work out of it. But don't tell me you're writing a story. Stories about characters, and I want to learn about the situations around the characters and the plot going on here. Don't waste my time exploring your world. My players have been playing in my game, and Pat can attest to this, and Des. They've been playing at my table for, what, a year now? Maybe 6 months, something like that? They know that the entire world is essentially mapped, and they can walk anywhere. But they only learn about what's in front of them and what's currently going on with them.
And
Yeah,
I can
they're-
only drag the party in one direction.
There's absolutely a difference. Like George R. R. Martin, he can set the hell out of a scene, but is he telling a story? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the
Well, I
best
think another
work
thing
is...
too is the other thing is that like I think that another problem is that on YouTube there's a lot of people who have like dozens of videos related to their world building project, and it's just about building out their worlds. That makes for good content, and it gives you a steady flow of things to talk about for your channels. But like, not everyone, like, your one story you're going to talk about is not going to be able to fit everything your world Bible videos or your world building book itself into that one story. Like,
Yeah.
you need to have actual characters there to make that world interesting. And like, in
The
a
thing is-
way, it's like world Bibles are kind of like a fluffier, more pretty form of procrastination. Like, you could spend all your time
Yes.
developing this one aspect of the world instead of actually writing out your story. I have a big problem with this myself. There's a lot of things I love doing when it comes to like building out my worlds, and then I have to smack myself and be like, no, you need to actually fill out these characters and work on the story. The little trade routes that I'm working on do not matter to the story. Actually write the story, man.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
first 3
absolutely.
novels that I put into my setting don't actually like follow any particularly important events in the setting. It's just someone who lives in the setting, and it's their story, which I think is a better way to explore your world building than just telling people. Than just don't.
Hey,
I'm
by
going
the
to tell
way,
you all
That's why
right now,
RPG is great for that.
I got a review of his novel on my channel. It's the best sci-fi novel you never heard of. Go watch it if you're interested, chat. And his
By the
books are
way-
linked below. But I'll also tell you this on Pag's thing. I've been 3 years now, Pag, playing in his setting, so I have a really deep understanding. I've read a lot of his lore stuff that he's written, and I've gone through he's got an RPG design with it. I've gone through and read a lot of the little bits of lore, and I've asked him questions, so I know way more than what the books cover, especially just with all the fantasy races, and I would say sci-fi races, and I would even say I understand the overarching theme of his setting, and that is almost not touched on in the books. His books are very much like they hint at it. You can see what's going on there in the background, which is how Lord of the Rings is also written, for the record. It's not in your face with the settings theme. The only setting that works with its theme being in your face is Cyberpunk, but that's like we're here for corporate evil, and that's the whole reason we're here for this setting.
Hey,
Yes.
by the way, Pag, what is your trilogy called? Where can we
It's
find?
called The
Oh
Homestead
my
Trilogy.
goodness, you dirty shell.
You can
That's-
find it on Amazon. It's by Lex
So-
Henderson. That's my pen name.
There we go, boys. Read them. They're interesting. I would say Terran / Nero is a toss-up between my favorite characters. I like Nero. I really liked him.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
Terran's
Aaron's
I,
my boy.
I enjoy writing.
Laska's my favorite, by the way,
villains.
Pops.
Laska's a good character. I enjoy writing villains that aren't necessarily villains. It's not even. I mean, he's just a complicated figure. He is a villain. He's the antagonist, but he's also
the
not
antagonist.
necessarily.
antagonist versus villain. Yes, interesting enough. But check him out, brother. Yeah, there you go. Check him out.
Yeah, and like I said, he hints at some of the stuff that's going on in this setting, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in the background. But like, it doesn't drag the story down at all. I couldn't tell you. Well, if you read his books, you couldn't tell if he's got 20 or 30 years developing this setting. You have no idea, but it's well fleshed out enough that you expect there to be stuff. You see small hints in small corners, references to this war, references to this little detail that somebody talks about, that planet that they were from, things like that. So you could fully see that it's built out as a world, and you know that if you could sit down with him and ask him a question, 90% of the stuff he would have an answer to that. And you just know that reading. You don't even have to ask him. In fact, if you send super chats right now, he'll answer any question you want, and he won't get any of the money for it.
That's true.
very
I will do that,
Yeah.
and I am not being paid.
Yeah. However, if you send a super chat of $10 or more, I'll buy another copy of his book.
But then you wouldn't be making money on that.
Yeah, good.
You know-
I need.
You know
good
what?
copy.
I'm gonna
Turn-
bet nobody's gonna send a $10 super chat. They're wimps. They're crybabies.
We love you, Chad.
I do
Give
love
us
chat
your-
though.
So true. Anyway, yeah, where were we?
I don't know. I think this is we covered a lot of ground, a lot of good stuff here talking about fantasy and different ways that you should deal with dinosaurs in it.
So
I
that's
feel successful, to be honest. I'm happy. This was a good show so far.
Zim. You got another topic you want to jump on, or what?
Honestly, if you ask me anything about dinosaurs and fantasy or sci-fi, I could keep going on for hours and hours. It's literally.
What's your favorite piece of Dino media?
Oh God.
And don't
That's
say
really
Godzilla.
It doesn't
No,
have to be
no.
your number one favorite. It just has to be one that you highly recommend or find interesting. It could be interesting for the wrong reasons too.
Probably, I would say it's gonna be either a toss-up between the Pellucidar series or the acclaimed Turok series, because I like the idea of a Hollow Earth setting, and I think that there's untapped potential for that, and I think Pellucidar does it in like a very fun fantasy pseudo sci-fi type of way. And with Turok, it's more urban fantasy in the sense where you have modern day people time traveling, people from the past time traveling, and there's a little bit more wiggle room with what you get, where you have dinosaurs, aliens, demons, and stuff. And with Pellucidar, it was less that. It was more focused on its own setting, with the other stuff by Burroughs not really crossing over as much. But I would love if people were to take the setting of Pellucidar, Barsoom Mars, and Tarzan, and really dig deep into that interconnected world. The same thing with even though there's not too many dinosaurs, and I like Hyboria as well. But I'd probably say Pellucidar and Turok. Those are my two pieces of Dino media that I love tremendously, as well as Primal up there as well. Because that essentially takes the Hyborian setting and has dinosaurs be a bigger focus in them.
Oh yeah, we didn't clarify it. So you are a fan of Primal then?
I am a big fan of Primal. Yeah.
All right.
So two things. One, Dr. Godzilla over here, he mentioned Pellucidar earlier so that you got him into that. So good job on that. And also,
Yeah.
Kaijunot says he picked up some Turok comics and he was trying to get into the series. Any specific books or issues of the comic you recommend starting with and looking at maybe?
So in this case, if you want to go into what is commonly known as Turok these days, and the closest is to what you're going to get to the new game that's coming out, I would recommend the Acclaim Era's Dinosaur Hunter run, since most of what's modern Turok goes off of that, as well as if you want to play the games which have been remastered by Night Dive Studios, which would be Turok, Dinosaur Hunter from the NES, 2 Seeds of Evil, and Shadow of Oblivion. Those are all really fun to play, and you're going to get more out of it if you play those games and read those comics, as well as it's going to feel closer to what the new game that just got announced at the Game Awards is going to be like. But if you want something that's closer to Valley of Gwanji or The Lost World from Conan Doyle or King Kong, then you may have to cash out a little bit more money to look for the Son of Stone comics, which are from the 50s. And there's an animated series, not animated series, there's an animated movie called Turok Son of Stone that follows more of that original continuity, but with more of the sensibilities of the Acclaim era. And it comes down to aesthetics, really. If you want more sci-fi, Acclaim. If you want more classic 50s dinosaur pulp, then you're going to want anything that says Son of Stone on it.
Son of Stone, got you.
There you go,
Yeah.
Kaijunot. Dig in, my friend.
As well as the other thing, too, is that when it comes to Pellucidar, there's the original books At the Earth's Core, Pellucidar, Women of Pellucidar, and there was one Tarzan story where he does go to Pellucidar, and even the Burroughs interconnected universe kind of went into the Disney era too, because I know the Disney Tarzan movie had an animated series, and they had a dinosaur episode there as well, which is kind of a nod to Burroughs'
Really?
old work. But
Mhm.
what's interesting is that, like Lovecraft's work and like Howard's work, all of Burroughs' stuff is mostly in the public domain. So, like, if anyone wants to pick up more and like carry on that legacy of Pellucidar, they are able to do that. For Lovecraft, I know he didn't really do anything dinosaur specific himself, but I have been working on adapting a story that was dinosaur related that Lovecraft wrote about in his Commonplace journal. So, in terms of like stuff I'm doing, that's what I want to do is carry on that kind of legacy there.
Yeah, shout out to Lovecraft, man. Fun fact about Lovecraft, he was one of the most prolific like letter writers. Like everything in the archive about him, he wrote as many like letters to his friends and everything. He was very good at just going over and talking about how to write and stuff. Like I think the amount of letters that he wrote that's on record is like second only to like Voltaire. Like you can learn from him.
Yeah, what's interesting is that because I like live in what is this ostensibly Lovecraft country, I know in a couple months for my birthday, I'm gonna kind of dip out by myself and go down to Providence and go to the library where some of his stuff is, and just kind of read over that myself.
Yeah, and even if it's not specifically dinosaurs, like the stuff that he wrote, he captures the vibe of like seeing this otherworldly, monstrous being and everything. It is something if you're interested in that sort of genre. I guess you'd call it a genre setting, but he is the type of guy where if you want to learn how to set up a world where these monstrous beings are taking over the earth, or you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
he's
You can
he's a
adapt dinosaurs to his stories very well.
Yeah, because Lovecraft's all about the ancient, unknowable monsters from the past, so it fits.
Yeah.
I do want to
There
say
you
a
go.
couple things. So with Pellucidar, it is written by Edgar Rice Burroughs, and he is incredibly famous. He wrote Tarzan, as was mentioned. He also wrote the John Carter series.
Yep.
A fun fact that I know about him is, even though we still talk about a lot of his writings and how important they are, he fought in the Civil War.
Yeah.
That's how old this dude was. He
was
fought
one
in
of
the
the
Civil
more-
War, and he wrote some foundational pieces of fantasy and sci-fi media.
I was about to say he's one of those guys who was like pre-Tolkien fantasy, very influential in that regard.
His like as I've dug more into classic fiction, he as well as Howard are like two people where I think when I think of American fantasy, I think of Conan and I think of Tarzan, Pellucidar as being things that I want to emulate more in my writing versus Tolkien. Nothing wrong with Tolkien. I love Tolkien, but there's just a vibe that you get from their stories that I don't really see anywhere else in the modern day.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Tolkien. It's almost like the way that took over Nickelodeon. It's like it kind of just destroyed the vibe of everything else that was there before. Like Tolkien obviously has so much.
Fritz Leiber's another one who got destroyed
Yeah.
by Tolkien showing up.
Yep.
And
Yep.
like when I think Tolkien, like all of his world, it very much screams England, and that was the point. But with Howard, even though like he has a lot of characters who are coming from a similar place, like Conan, Cimmerians end up becoming like the English and like the Scots and all of those people, but it feels less like that. It feels more like
More
antiquity.
American.
So like it feels more American, but like when I think of like a setting, it's more like Greece, Rome. Even like when I think of it's Britain, I think of it less as like Anglo-Saxons and more like the Britain tribes that have intermixed with the Romans, like that
Yeah, the
tumultuous time.
Brythonics.
Yeah.
The Britons, yes.
So I do want to say,
another
building on
real
that,
quick-
all these guys are the reasons that D&D feels so different than Lord of the Rings as well, because the guys who made D&D were reading these authors. So if you want to get back to the source that gave them the inspiration, this is the stuff you got to read, chat.
Yeah. A specific book that I would recommend people to read if they want to see old dinosaur fiction, it's called Storia Monstra. It has several short stories, and it also has The Lost World as the only novel it's a part of. But the interesting thing about it is that it goes from about 1893 as one of the earliest stories to 1955 as one of the later stories that it has in this collection. But you really see, even from that period between the 1800s to the 1900s, how dinosaurs changed in terms of fiction. I'll put the name in the chat as well as the ISBN for anyone who wants to look that up. Extra. I'm gonna put in the ISBN for you guys as well.
There you go. Oh, another one. Another author I want to bring up is Moorcock, of course. We got to talk about him with Elric. I know Elric has to have fist fought a dinosaur at some point.
Well, you know what's interesting too is that
All these guys are buddies.
I have to look it up. Moorcock. There's like a picture of Elric riding, I think, a dragon, but that dragon just looks like a giant Dimorphodon, which is like a type of pterosaur. Let me see if I can send that to you because like it look.
Oh yeah, I got it up on chat right now. I'll put it on screen.
Yeah, put it on screen.
Let me get it on screen for her.
So I started reading Elric, right? I got a question before I continue reading this book. Does he ever stop being a weak, crippled loser? Is that a thing? No,
that's kind of his thing. Yeah.
I like how you just sadly say no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
He's kind of always a
I'm
baby
not gonna read
bitch.
any more of this novel. I really I got tired of him being so like weak and loserish. Like, come on, dude.
It's his sword is the thing. The sword does all the work.
Yeah, exactly. Which is not interesting for me to read about.
Oh, even what's it called? That Candor. That wasn't even the one I was thinking of. I think there's another one I want to send to you. Okay.
That dragon has balls for knees. You see that? You see that?
Let me
this
see
one. You thinking of?
Yeah, look at it. Look at his left kneecap.
Peg, that
Those
is
are
just,
balls.
there's no fat, okay? This man is dieting, okay? Calm
guess.
down, okay?
I don't know.
This is the ideal form. No fat. No fat.
All these dragon. All scrotum hominis.
Is this what you're thinking about, Zim?
1 second.
It's called being double jointed.
It hasn't updated. 1 sec. I'm looking at it from the YouTube side. No, not that one either. I just found it.
All right, send it in the cord, baby.
Although it may not be Elric, but I always associated this image with Elric. 1 sec.
If you shoot it in the Discord, I'll put it on screen for chat.
Let me put it. Which channel do you want me to put it in? Just
Council text chat. Yep.
There you go. Yeah, this one right here, by Frank Frazetta.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a dragon dinosaur thing. Let's see.
I like this. Wow, look at that.
Yeah, like that is when I see that, it just looks like Frazetta's art. He never did a lot of dinosaurs, but any of his stuff that was like dinosaur fantasy, it is so beautiful.
Frank Frazetta slaps hard, dude. He
really
is
does.
so underrated. One of the reasons that early fantasy took off is because his art was just that good.
The art, yes, the art. There's something to be said, man. Honestly,
It has an ethereal quality to it.
We have truly lost society.
it's such like it's an eclectic mix. Like you get the guys with like the Viking horned helmets and the axes and everything versus these ancient creatures. It's such an interesting I don't know what to say. It's great.
Or this one right here. This is another one that I really love by him.
Well, it's playing into like the Conan thing because like with Conan you get he's not a his image isn't as much a like prehistoric fighting the woolly mammoth. It's much more like 8th century or something barbarian, that has some metal. He's able to make a sword.
Yeah,
like they have technology that's more advanced than that 8th century to be able to make better weapons, be able to make some sort of metal armor, some sort of smithing.
Yeah, when you get a chance, put that second image on the screen. That perfectly encapsulates kind of like the scale of the.
Already on to the third image at this point. Don't worry, it's gonna load up for chat soon.
Yeah, that one's awesome. That second one might be my favorite of all the I've seen.
That third image, wow.
That third image, there's a slight chance will be demonetized. Let's see if YouTube can pick it up.
Well,
with hand. Let's deploy the NFT.
Rooney, where are you? I know you love cake. We got plenty of it here.
Exactly.
Come on.
All right, deploy the censorship Doge. We're now legally safe from YouTube with my Doge NFT.
I don't think legally is what we're gonna. I think we're gonna be hit with something else rather than legal.
I know this one isn't by Frazetta, but like this is another like Conan versus dinosaur one that I love as well.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You get the fantasy vibe of like the big muscular, like the Viking looking dude.
Exactly. It's always the big. It's
Big
not even
sweaty
Vikings
men,
per
my
se.
favorite.
It's just
Yeah,
it's big barbarian. Like if you're not seeing him at the gates of Rome, like is it really a guy who's gonna fight dinosaurs?
I
Like
just
they're
love
not
that
gonna
the raptor's got his hand on his shoulder. He's like, "Come on, we need to talk about your drinking problem." So he stabs him through the mouth.
I don't got a
Oh,
problem.
yeah.
It's only a problem if I run out.
Exactly.
So Chad, this just goes to show once again, if you can come up with a wild concept and you want to make it work, like please go for it. Like honestly, throw caution to the wind if you must. But if you can come up with something awesome like this, like I guarantee people will be into it. Like it's worth giving it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Awfully quiet there, Pag. You right?
I just don't have much to add. And when I don't have anything to say, my lips are sealed. I do love Frank Frazetta's art. Frank Frazetta's art is a classic. It is that he was that guy.
He was that
Oh.
bro.
Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Like if I could find an artist as good as Frank Frazetta to do the art for my game one day, I would be a happy man.
Good.
That would be.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going to cost me approximately $87 trillion. So it'll be a little while.
Just hit the lottery, forehead.
Yeah, there we go.
So true.
As well, since I did mention it, just to do a distinction between it, I'll show this one coming up for anyone who's like when I mentioned Turok. If you're looking for like the classic 50s stuff, you're gonna look for comics that look kind of more like this versus the Dinosaur Hunter stuff, which
Okay.
is
Yes, that is another excellent one. It shows like pretty much everything you need to know about this setting in one image. Goodness. So Zim, do you have a favorite dinosaur?
I remember back in the day, I used to be that kid who was basic and loved T-Rex as his favorite dinosaur. As I've gotten older, I'm split between Ceratosaurus and Carnotaurus, mainly because
Oh,
they
yes.
just seem more interesting as dinosaurs, where Ceratosaurus in particular, it's not the biggest carnivore of its environment, but it has all these features that are basal for its time. Like it has 4 fingers, it has these like spines that run down its back, it has these horns, and it lives in this time period where it lives with Allosaurus and then Torvosaurus, which is like a megalosaur. And what I find interesting about Ceratosaurus is that when you go further into history with the Cretaceous, Ceratosaurus and that whole family are what end up becoming the Abelisaurs and later on things like Carnotaurus. And as like as the Cretaceous moved on, you saw Abelisaurs become more common, and like how Tyrannosaurs became more common in North America and became these giant animals. Abelisaurs were kind of phasing out the Carcharodontosaurs that were roaming around next to them. So it's almost like this underdog story throughout prehistory that I find so interesting. Plus, like, the closest you're going to get to like a kaiju looking dinosaur outside of dinosaurs just being kaiju is Ceratosaurus. Like, it is such a beautiful dinosaur, and like its classic portrayals and its modern depictions are super like vibrant to me. I love that dinosaur so much.
Grab some photos so Kid can actually put something
Yeah.
on.
Let me show you
so
like a
you do
modern.
that. I would say
Because I don't base dinosaurs off of names. Like that, though, there's like 50 of them, and they're like all.
Oh
like,
yeah, no, definitely.
3 letters off. I need like the picture, okay?
Yeah, so let me show a picture of like a Ceratosaurus.
Then I'm like, oh, that's the one with the horns. That's the one with the,
Yeah, even in my Dinotopia video, I'm like, look, I know they have a specific name for this, but it's the Triceratops with 1 horn. Shush.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when it gets to like the Triceratops ones, then it's like I don't know the specific name. It's got.
Oh
like, a
yeah,
big horn.
That reminds me, Zim. I don't know if you've seen my latest video. Do you know the name that they gave the human dinosaur hybrids?
I do not remember.
It's Anthroceratops because there's a human and it's a Triceratops. I figure you get a kick out of that.
The thing is that like some dinosaur names are absolutely hilarious. Like you'll have like Monoclonius, Styracosaurus, and you just have Thanos, and you're like, oh, Okay.
Well, all
Well,
right.
you're like,
Well,
okay.
what was it was a lot of the stuff with like species that got discovered was based on the people that discovered them, wasn't it?
That's
it's
usually
either
the secondary name. So,
All right,
like, for
so what's the first
example,
dinosaur you
usually
sent up here first? Let's look at chat.
Ceratosaurus.
There you go.
Tyrannosaurus.
It's Ceratosaurus.
And then I'll show Carnotaurus, or like, since you did Disney's Dinosaur, you'll probably know them more as like Carnotaurus.
yeah. The thing
Dude,
with
let me tell you.
dinosaurs is I'm pretty sure it's either like they're like what's a Latin Greek name, or it's like the same thing with like bugs and animals and stuff, where they're like,
Mhm.
what does the guy want it to be named? And that's either myself or I want it to be named after like the funny
Me.
mustache man, because I really just adore the funny mustache.
Yeah. So, like, for
And
example,
it's one of those
Herrerasaurus
two.
is just called Herrera's lizard, for one example. Then you have like
Yeah, yeah.
Tyrannosaurus.
It's either let's get all, let's make a stupid name sound good because we did in Latin or like Greek or something, or I just really love funny mustache man or like Trump or something, just
Yeah.
some celebrity that they're like, I freaking love this dude.
Is there not a dinosaur out there? It's got a name that's like Americanus, or isn't there?
There's gotta be. There's
I'm
no
trying
way
to
there's not.
I'm trying to remember what it was.
Americanus
You'll
Patreonus.
put like Americanosaurus and they'll be like, bam,
Oh
right there.
god.
You'll
Like,
see it.
there's this what's it called? There's like Thanatorestes, which is like Death Ripper essentially, as like its name.
That's awesome.
It's like,
That's
yeah,
the
it's
coolest
like,
name ever.
it's not
What's your
even like
dinosaur?
a big
Oh, Death Ripper.
yeah,
Yes.
like, let me make sure I get the exact meaning down. Yeah, Reaper of Death.
So yeah,
Thanatorestes.
anything with Thanos, that's Greek. It means death, right?
Yeah.
For the record, chat, that's not the guys on screen. These are the Carnotaurs we're showing right now.
So what's cool?
So, yeah.
Carnotaurs are probably
Here's the Death Ripper.
Carnotaurs, a combination of things. That would probably be my personal favorite, based on childhood movies that I watched at the time. I would say my favorites were probably number one, Carnotaurus from the movie Dinosaur, which we discussed, which I love. I love the combination of the appearance as well as the name, meaning meat eating bull, Carno meat, Taurus bull. That's awesome. And they just, they look awesome in the movie. And then on top of that, say Spinosaurus, based on Jurassic Park, I actually like them better than the T-Rex, which I think it was part 3, right? Where
Yeah,
it was
Jurassic Park 3.
Jurassic Park 3 is where that one I love because they have like right at the beginning. They're like, by the
Yeah.
way, we're doing Spinosaurus and we're gonna like, how do we show that this one's better than the T-Rex? We'll just have one kill a T-Rex in the beginning. Like I love that mentality of like, how do we show that this one's bigger and cooler? It's like just fight.
It just like snaps at T-Rex's neck, yeah.
Yeah, it snaps its T-Rex,
right.
the T-Rex's neck in like the opening running away sequence.
As
That's
soon
how
as-
they're like, it's better.
Ellen. Yeah.
Yeah, I posted it in the chat of like an evolution of how Spinosaurus evolved with new discoveries and like finding more of its bones. It's such an interesting dinosaur. Like I've always found it an interesting dinosaur, less interesting to me than like T-Rex or Ceratosaurus, but like its history is crazy because Ernst Stromer found it in Africa. But the problem is that he was a German paleontologist in Bad Man, Germany. And because he didn't follow what the bad man liked, his fossils were not protected when the bombings of Berlin happened, and most of its discoveries were destroyed. And ultimately, it stunted our understanding of Spinosaurus until we started finding other animals similar to Spinosaurus, which is how its resurgence in the 2000s ended up causing it to become the main dinosaur for Jurassic Park 3.
Easily the worst thing that they did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially since Jurassic Park 2 doesn't really, it's like they're T-Rex Part 2, like, but Jurassic Park 3, they're like, we gotta mix this up.
Mm-hmm.
Man,
I still love JP3 over like the Jurassic World movies. It just, even though it just feels more connected in aesthetics and everything.
That one has T-Rex piss, so of course it's better.
As much as people will, for lack of a better word, bitch and moan that the second and third Jurassic Park movies just don't measure up to the first one, the new trilogy, as soon as I knew it was coming out, I was like, these are not going to be good. I was like almost upset that they were remaking it.
It's just like the new Disney trilogy. The first one was all right. Then the second one was like, what in the hell? And the third one, I hate you and I want you all to die.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I feel
And
like
then you
the
go back and
first
watch the
one
first one,
might.
and it's, yeah, sounds good as I remember.
The
Hey, you
thing
know,
for me is that,
The
like,
first
at
one's not as
least
good, but I feel like it might compete with 2 and 3. But like, it's hard to tell.
is there?
with like the Jurassic sequels, they don't feel as offensive as the Star Wars sequels.
Oh no, thank goodness for
Uh,
that.
Yeah,
Like,
but that's
they-
mainly because
They're
like any attempt they have to like try to connect it to the original just falls flat. Like
I'd
they try.
rather
Like,
that. Like,
no, I agree. It's better, but like in the with Star Wars, it's like, oh, we're gonna ruin this character, and the other one in this, it's like, by the way, there's just this guy that we never talked about, and also he's dead now.
Yeah.
So like,
yeah.
It's just crappy
It's like
sequel
they're-
instead of I hate you for existing.
yeah,
Mhm.
because the other ones are like, we're ruining this character. Where the Jurassic ones are like, by the way, there's this secret guy who worked on it the whole time. We swear, anyways, he's dead now, so it doesn't
Yeah,
even.
it was similar to the way I felt about like probably the fifth Pirates of the Caribbean movie, where it was like, you know what, I'll watch it. It's fun. It's a fun little thing. I don't want to hate on it. I know it's not good, but it's a fun little adventure to go on.
Yeah,
Like you got to
yeah.
look at it to enjoy it. Um, yeah, man. Honestly,
Speaking of like games outside of Carnivores, which I mentioned earlier, which has a thriving modding community, like there's a whole Discord for it, which is huge. Like the amount of like dinosaur nerd stuff in there is super fun. If anyone has an emulator for like DS games, Fossil Fighters is a beautiful game.
Of course, Fossil Fighters come up.
Fossil Fighters is the G.
I know, dude. I used to play at like arcades. I would do like whatever Fossil Fighter thing there was.
yeah.
There was
We got
Fossil Fighter.
anything else? We got anything else on Fossil Fight? There is one more point I want to bring up before if we might be wrapping it up soon.
I think
Hit
we
it,
are
bro.
wrapping
Hit
it up. So if you want to bring it up, go bring us home, pops.
Sure.
There we go.
What I wanted to bring up was, interestingly enough, Zim, you probably know about this if you looked into the lore of the Jurassic World trilogy. The idea that you've heard of, like, conceptually first, instead of the Indominus Rex, they had the idea of dinosaur-human hybrids, right?
Yep. That was something they were thinking about doing for at one point for some of Jurassic Park 3, and then after Jurassic Park 3, they wanted to do that for like Jurassic Park 4, and that was something that they wanted to do for the movies at one point. There was the horror attraction for Islands of Adventure called Project Evolution, where they had people walking around as dinosaur human hybrids during like Halloween. So that's the closest they got to anything canonical, quote unquote, in the Jurassic series. But that was like back in the day, in like the early 2000s. And that
I
was
would,
before Islands of Adventure switched from Jurassic Park to Jurassic World.
yeah. Because when I first found out that they were planning on doing that, and then it like gradually became the Indominus Rex, which was like an intelligent, strategic creature, it almost was like, oh, like, I don't want to say it because the implication of like human dinosaur hybrids is pretty wild, and all that and everything. Like everything about the Indominus Rex kind of still applies to what they had in their head as a human dinosaur hybrid. It's intelligent, it knows how to manipulate and everything. I thought it was really cool, but I also get why they didn't make that part of the story.
I'll say this. I even before I heard about this idea, and I'll send some in the chat for people to get this on screen. I've always felt that Jurassic Park was it shared similar space with like Resident Evil. And when I saw like the designs that you'll see on screen, my immediate thought was like Jurassic Park has dipped more into like the bioweapon Resident Evil type territory.
With
And,
that,
like,
I'm just getting like straight up like Resident Evil 5 vibes. To be
yeah.
honest. Like this just feels like Resident Evil 5.
And like I like Resident Evil. I think it's fun. And I think that like something like this would be very fun as like a side story in the Jurassic Park universe. I really wouldn't want the main movies to tackle it because immediately when you get to something like that, it feels like an upping of the ante. And that was something that even Jurassic World struggled with when it came to hybrids. And it was like
Yeah.
you had to improve on the hybrid. And like a lot of people think that the Giganotosaurus from Dominion was kind of a downgrade from like what the hybrids were, especially for like newer fans. And like even before the human dinosaur hybrids, there was an animated series where they wanted to do like mutant monsters, and there was this T-Rex concept art that was floating around for a while as like something they wanted to do. And
Yeah, I definitely the like. I don't know if you.
I
I
got
don't
you.
know, because with like the dinosaur hybrid thing, it feels like something in Resident Evil 5, and I say that almost in a bad way because like Resident Evil 5, like you can't start with Resident Evil 5. You need to
Yeah.
build up to it. You know, like Resident Evil 1, like is a very very small. You're in a mansion, you're killing stuff. Resident Evil 2 is like okay, it's spread out to a city, whatever. Resident Evil 3 is like okay, it's the same city, whatever. Resident Evil 4, things are getting a little weird because then it's like okay, we unearthed like this ancient alien, ancient disease thing.
Yeah.
And then you get 5, which just goes like off the walls, and that's how I kind of feel with this like
No, I definitely agree.
dinosaur hybrid.
It's kind of like one of those things. Like it maybe feels close to my head because of the fact that they did Dino Crisis, and Dino Crisis is essentially like it could fit as its own little Jurassic Park type of scenario, and fit nicely into the canon to some degree. And they, especially in the later Dino Crisis games, they went off the walls because they had like in Dino Crisis 3 alien dinosaur hybrids and
Oh.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like,
I will say like the Ultimasaurus, where it's I can already see in the bottom, it's from Jurassic Evolution 2. I think
Yeah, it's
it'd
from
be,
Chaos
like,
Theory, yeah.
if they leaned
Chaos
more
Effect.
into like the Jurassic Evolution stuff, where like they're like I don't know, let's just make some cool looking OC dinosaur. Please do not steal. Like I think you
Please
can
do
do
not
stuff
steal.
with that. Like I mean, like come on, like look at this. It's got the
It has
It's
all the
got-
features of of like the
all
iconic
the-
dinosaurs.
exactly. It's got the Velociraptor thing. It's got
The thing, the other thing. Great descriptions, Des.
Thank
The
you.
tricorns and frills, the raptor claws,
Yeah.
the ankylosaur armor, yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
aesthetically, yes.
And Kylosaur's my favorite dino, by the way.
Is it?
Ankylosaurs is so interesting.
Anklet?
It's even got the Spinosaurus tail. That is a very funny meme.
The snapping.
That is a very funny meme.
What's your favorite dinosaur, Peg? You have a son. You have to have an answer for this now.
Yeah, come on.
Your son is going to disown you if you don't have a favorite dinosaur. This
You have
is
to have
a
the correct
very
answer,
important
Peg. What
question.
is it?
What is it, Peg?
Oh, he might be currently actually dealing with his son.
Oh my gosh, this prick.
He's debating. He's debating with him.
Oh,
All right.
goodness.
Yeah, you know, he went in his son's room. Son, what's the correct answer? And he's like, yeah, because he's 3.
Uh-huh.
My goodness. All right. So we'll get back
Then you
to
have to mute himself.
All right, so I think with that, we're going to call it here. Me and Nebula are going to be playing Baldur's Gate 3 soon, allegedly.
All right.
Chat has one more
Nice.
thing. Dr. Godzilla wants us to look up Stegron from Marvel.
Oh yeah, I can bring up that.
All right, chat, you get to look at Stegron before we go.
Let's
There
go.
we
I
go.
love Ankylosaurs. They would make the best friend. A tank that I could ride to work. It'd be very fun.
He's just a little guy.
Just a little
He's just
guy.
a happy little guy.
Just
Little-
the clubbing tail of death.
Yeah.
You just,
All
you know,
right.
everybody else got swords
Oh
and
my
blades.
goodness.
and he just
What
breaks your
the
neck.
hell?
He's got a club. Look at him.
What the frick?
Stegron is just. You wish you had this alpha chat energy.
No, he's just got that riz.
Spider-Man in the freaking there.
You already know. All right. So, chat. In the meantime, look up Peg's books, Homestead Trilogy by Lex Henderson, as well as I believe it's what is it, Scion of the Void.
Scion of the Void. That's the one linked in chat.
Subscribe to Blackaroony. Make sure you subscribe to Blackaroony. Look up Zim as well. Zim puts out
Yeah,
some good.
Zim's got great stuff. He's linked to the channel description.
Thank
in
you,
fact,
thank you.
let me grab a direct link as well for you, Zim. And I'll post it in
Aw.
chat for those who are chilling with us tonight. They can go straight to your channel and perhaps check out a couple of your videos. You know, maybe give you a little watch-a-room right from here.
Thank you so much. I
That's-
am working on 2 videos at the moment that I want to get out, and then a big third one that's going to be coming out around May, where I continue to bash Godzilla98 for being the trash that it is.
Oh, come on.
So it's so chat, you know, since we stand Godzilla 98 here, and I know Rooney's in chat. By the way, you should, if you really want to be interesting, technically speaking, by the measurements of what makes a perfect Godzilla film, Godzilla 98 by default becomes the perfect Godzilla.
That's
Oh,
so
really?
basic.
Yes,
Why?
if
So
you list out
basic.
all the actual requirements, especially ones Blackaroonie lists, it is
Oh,
the
like
only
what?
film that passes them. It's very funny.
You want to know what's really interesting about that is I actually have the legal document between Sony and Toho, and I'm going to be showing it in these videos as they come out. I'm only going to be doing one of these a year because they're going to be several hours long, and because of how much like development hell that movie was in, Emmerich literally broke several of the actual requirements in the legal document. It's crazy.
Based?
That's
Okay.
wild.
Based?
Wow.
Yeah. It was at a point where like because they just kept giving it to him, he was like, "Sure, I just get to do whatever I want and whatever like actual requirements there were be damned."
That's funny. All right, but with that chat,
I think that's the perfect meme also to end it off on. But I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs.
it is a perfect. But yes,
All
chat,
right.
thank you for joining us tonight. You all have an excellent evening. Next week, I am streaming on Christmas. It's going to be a solo outing, probably. Anybody in the server is welcome to join. If you join the Discord, you can join the call. We're going to be
Oh
streaming.
my goodness. You're gonna let
Uh,
everyone in?
Yeah, we'll
Wow.
let everybody in. I'll let anybody in. They have to, because we're doing something a little special.
Oh my goodness.
I found out that It's a Wonderful Life is copyright free. So we're going to be streaming it and talking over it about how much you love Christmases. So yeah, come join us, chat.
But what
Merry
if? But you're gonna let it to anyone. So what if Ebenezer Scrooge comes in?
And we will show him The Muppet Christmas Carol, which is the best movie for Christmas of all time.
It really is
Yeah,
the
base.
best.
That's a
the best
base choice.
Christmas
I agree
movie.
with that. Yeah.
It hits everything right. The Christmas Carol is probably overall the best Christmas story because it's one of the only ones that has all the correct themes but doesn't bog itself down with Santa. And the Muppets take it so sincerely in the best way. I could not have asked for a better presentation of the film.
Yes.
And
The
Michael
best
Caine
actor
just
of all
crushes
time.
it.
Michael Caine, like he sent it. He was awesome.
He took it from a 9 to a 10.
It's crazy
very
because I
good.
actually
I remember I
never.
had some issues with it, but I don't remember my issues with it. It was a long time. I think I watched it like last year.
Like I was introduced to A Christmas Carol through the Muppets movie before I'd seen any adaptation of the story any other way. So like my entire like feelings about A Christmas Carol come from that movie before anything else.
They did it well. They did
They
it very well.
did a really good job.
And with that, I'll see you all next week, chat. Thank you for streaming with us. Goodbye, everybody.
Peace.